Chaos. "3,000 years ago, the god of destruction, Chaos, and his anger nearly flooded the earth. Before he could completely envelop the world, he was sealed away with his anger and hatred intact. Now, in the modern day, Chaos was released from his seal by the evil Dr. Eggman, who plans on using his power to rule the planet. Little does he know, unlike his other schemes, this power he wields now cannot be controlled. I mean, the name should have been a dead giveaway. Alright, Sonic and his allies will need to discover the truth behind the origins of this dark history by connecting the pieces of a forgotten past. To prevent the world from falling into total chaos, you're gonna have to open your heart for this adventure. You're tuning in to the JayBlast Network. Oh yeah, welcome to the next level.
Oh yeah, I'm feeling the love.
You feel the love. But what's your name?
Gary Payton, but they call me the glove.
How you feeling tonight?
Yo, I'm feeling the love.
Feel the love.
I'm feeling the Sonic. Yo, Sonic. Man, stay off the light speed.
My bad.
Sonic Adventure on Sega Dreamcast. It's thinking.
1999 was the start of a dream. The Dreamcast, to be exact. Well, actually it was 1998. We're talking about Japan. But at the mark of the millennium, Sega needed something out of a dream to keep afloat. You see, after multiple mistakes with systems like the 32X and the Western performance of the Sega Saturn, Sega was in a tight bind. Now don't get me wrong, the Saturn was a huge success in Japan. I mean, it had the opposite effect that the Sega Genesis had over there, but many franchises rising during that period like Virtua Fighter and Sakura Wars. But over here, it just wasn't doing as well as the competition. Not because it didn't have quality titles, because the Saturn's library is absolutely amazing, but just because of the marketing and releases and all that other stuff. I can go into a whole video about that. And no other series that Sega had represented this problem better than Sonic. You see, I would say that Sonic had a rough transition into 3D.
Say another mother word and it's over. And I ain't playing.
Wait. Hear me out. It's not what you think. No, the rough transition wasn't the game we're talking about today, but the build up to it. You see, after Sonic 3K and Triple Trouble released in 1994, the original designers of the Sonic game took a break from the series to work on new games that were not Sonic. An important one being Nights into Dreams, which I covered on my channel a few years ago. They also made Burning Rangers for the Sega Saturn. Meanwhile, Sega released a plethora of spin-offs to recapture the Sonic mania that they once had, each varying in quality, with some being awesome and some being surprisingly enjoyable and some being just bad. While that was happening, Sega Technical Institute, or STI, was working on the next mainline Sonic game, Sonic Extreme, which would be the first 3D Sonic platformer, and it was supposed to release initially in 1996 to compete with Mario 64 and Crash Bandicoot. Man, what a year that would have been, huh? Well, it's too bad it got canceled. Yeah, Sonic Extreme could get its own video. Hell, one day I may even get it its own video. But to summarize what happened to the developers at STI, they really got screwed over by upper management at SOA and SOJ, that being Sega of America and Sega of Japan. The wrong prototypes were shown to the higher ups. New people would come in and out of the project and try to add things that were just not going to work with that engine. Hell, at one point they even tried to hand off development to a third-party studio, only to kick them off after seeing a different build of the game. This development was hell, but what the team was able to put together was welcomed by journalists at the time at E3 in 1996. However, the game had many issues, particularly with its frame rate, and STI at one point requested to use the nice engine that Sonic team was using. However, it was rejected. Now there's a whole story with that I don't want to get to in this video. Again, Sonic Extreme get its own video, but to cut to the chase, that wasn't what really killed Sonic Extreme. What killed Sonic Extreme was all that other stuff, plus the fact that some of its lead developers were nearly dying and being hospitalized from all the crunch they had to go through reworking the game during that hellish development cycle. When I hear this story, I just see it as a mess overall. It seemed like no one at Sega could get their shit together to put out one of their biggest franchises, and the developers and the fans had to suffer for it. Damn. So if you wanted your Sega platformer fix on the Saturn, where did you go? Well, you had Bug. That was originally supposed to be a Sonic game, but was rejected from using the IP. But hell no, this is not gonna cut it. You had Clockwork Knight. This is a cool little idea, but nah, need something else. You got a Stall. Hey, that's a really cool platformer. But what about something in 3D? Well, in 1996, you got Sonic 3D Blast. And no, folks, outside of the special stages, the Saturn version is not much better than the Genesis version. And I only say that because the special stages in Sonic 3D Blast on the Saturn are in 3D, but it's on rails like those special stages from Sonic 2. The only other 3D that we got was a mini game in the Christmas Nights in the Dream demo disc that you had to unlock, which was just the control scheme for the children except sped up, with Sonic being playable in that game. There was also an Eggman boss fight as he appeared as one of the bosses, but that wasn't enough. This is what you had to compete with the 3D platform releasing at the time, and Sonic was not going to sell consoles with this game, whether you liked it or not. We eventually got Sonic R, which I love, but I know that wasn't enough, and that was a racing game, not a platformer, even though it had platformer elements. Look, if you looked at every other genre on the Saturn, you had some banger lineups. Hell, Virtua Fighter was probably the Sonic for the Sega Saturn, or just Sega at the time. I mean, this was a 3D fighter in the arcades that was so popular, it got backported to the Sega Genesis 32X, and even had a Game Gear exclusive title released nearly at the end of its life, even getting a chibi kids version of it, a spin-off, a crossover with said spin-off, and even a Sonic fighting game based on its engine, with Sonic characters appearing in said crossover game on the Saturn. Yeah, Virtua Fighter was a big deal, along with titles like Nice, Panzer Dragoon, Daytona USA, Virtua Cop, A Stall, Last Bronx, Virtua On, and Soccer Wars in Japan, and many, many, many more. The Sega Saturn should have been a smash hit, even without a mainline Sonic game over here. And again, it was in Japan, but it just wasn't cutting it everywhere else, and the competition was fierce all around. This is also a time where many big names of the early 90s or the late 80s began to die out, and Sonic would have easily been on the chopping block. Another fad that was going to fade away, and it was going to be a dream if Sega was ever going to catch back up. Fortunately for us, that dream, even if it only lasted a moment, would come back to life. Sonic Team had returned to Sonic thanks to the push of none other than Takashi Iizuka, who was still with the series to this day. Iizuka would push for the game to be an RPG with the codename Sonic RPG, though it would not be a traditional RPG, but instead would have RPG elements, with a sort of makeshift party of around 6 playable characters, each providing their own gameplay styles. The team would have to redesign not only the gameplay, but the characters to fit more into a 3D space. The story would be expanded upon and have a larger focus following up on the events of Sonic 3. All of this was slated for the Saturn, but as development continued, the Saturn was reaching its sunset. The development would move on to the upcoming Dreamcast, Sega's final hurrah in the console space. However, the team would give fans a small preview of the gameplay in the compilation game Sonic Jam, where players could explore Sonic World, which used the engine they were going to use for the original Saturn version of the game. Sonic Team took everything they learned from developing Knights, and even went to South America to get inspiration from locations in the game. Little less to say, this game would be a big deal, as not only would it be Sonic's true first 3D adventure, but it would also be kicking off a new era for Sega with the Dreamcast. There was a lot riding on the success of this game, and if the competition was fierce in 1996, then it was only overwhelming by 1998 and of course 1999, as both the N64 and the PlayStation had begun to hit its stride with some of its most iconic releases. Games like Ocarina of Time, Final Fantasy VII, Spyro the Dragon, and Metal Gear Solid, and more were setting a new standard, and not to mention the sequels to popular franchises like Mario and Crash Bandicoot. Sega had to show out. They couldn't just release the same thing they made for the Genesis and succeed. They had to usher in a new era, a new dream for fans and newcomers alike, and that's what they did when Sonic Adventure released worldwide, because it released in Japan first actually. When it released worldwide, the dream would be realized. Oh yeah, this is happening, guys. I'm not here to try to convince you that this is a good game, because that would be redundant, much like I did in the Mario 64 video. This is a good game. We know this, but I think its impact was lost over time. Look, this wasn't my first video game, but it was the first video game that got me to take video game, and more specifically, video game design seriously. I know that sounds ridiculous to some of you. You're probably listing out better games to be inspired by, but you're gonna have to hear me out and open your ears or open your heart, because I want to look at why and how this game was designed and why this is the product that was needed to be released and not just another 2D Sonic game, or why 3D games like this had to be released in the first place, even if you may think they didn't age the best. That's why I want to discuss this today. Hi, my name is Jay, and you're tuning into the JayBlast Network, and I can't hold it in much longer because I can't let go of telling you about how much the past kicked ass. And I want you, no matter how long it lasts, to open your heart to see why I gotta do what I gotta do as we look at one of the greatest to ever do it, Sonic Adventure. Before I deep dive into anything, I want to go over the ports because it's the most divisive thing amongst the fans, and I also think it's part of why Sonic Adventure's impact was lost a bit over the years. Now, for most of the video, you'll be seeing the footage from the DX version of the game because it has the most content and it's the version that I grew up with, specifically the GameCube version. I know some people will tell you that the game was horrible with DX, but I just feel like it's an over-exaggeration. I've beaten the game multiple times on Dreamcast, GameCube, Xbox, and PC, and the DX version, at least on GameCube, has the most content. The biggest point of contention though is the graphics. The character models and the textures and the lighting specifically were changed in DX, probably to make it look more up to date, as it was a game that released in 1998 and now you had a version of it being released in 2003. Even though Sonic Adventure was in the same generation as the GameCube, the graphical difference in games had increased significantly in such a short period of time. I mean, look at the difference between the first Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure 2, or Jak 1 and Jak 2, a 2001 game compared to a 2003 game, or a big one, Soul Calibur versus Soul Calibur 2. Yeah, I can see why they wanted to change the graphics, and I'm personally fine with the models. They look like the models in the opening cutscenes and close to the artwork of the game, but it's the stage textures and the lighting that are the issue to me. Not only do they look worse, but in some areas they look outdated even for 2003. Whenever it's nighttime or any darkness, it feels like somebody has a nightlight on, and in some cases the textures just aren't as colorful as the original or completely changed for no good reason. I just don't get it. If you never played the game before, you probably won't care, and I didn't much when I was younger because I think the game looks alright for 2003. And if you need me to give a different perspective on this, then think about Mario 64. When Mario 64 dropped on the N64, when Mario 64 DS dropped, whether you care or like the art style or didn't like the art style or not, you can't deny that both of these games were technical showcases for their time. Right? Even Mario 64 DS was big because you could have it running on a handheld at the time. But Sonic Adventure, you were pretty much just porting the game to another system. That flair wasn't there as it was originally on the Dreamcast. So by the time you got onto the GameCube and it looked like this and it wasn't up to par with the other games, a lot of the stuff that you probably would praise it for being a game from 1998 or even 1999 just would be looked over by 2003 because you had already been there and done that with other games. So I can understand how DX brings Sonic Adventure down in that retrospect. If you played the original, I can understand you being mad as hell. Then there are the glitches, which I never really noticed before, but I did start to notice little ones in this playthrough. There are definitely a couple ones that appear at Emerald Coast and some other places, but they're so small and they don't happen a lot that I don't want to really count them. One that does reoccur is the clipping one, and that particularly happens at Emerald Coast. There is a particular one when you go on this curve here, but the one I kept getting was when Sonic would run, and sometimes when being chased by this whale, you end up falling off the bridge. I don't know why that happened, but it happened at least 3 times during this recording session for the game, and I had to bring it up. Another thing is the camera. I noticed when I put on Dreamcast, the camera, even though it got in the way, it wasn't as bad. I feel like the reason it was this way is because you can also change the free camera in the GameCube version and also the following the exports, which I didn't really use, but maybe that messed with the camera somehow, I don't know. But I will say it's a bit worse in some areas. But it's much like Mario 64 where, like, for the most part, the camera isn't bad, but when it's bad, it's really bad. But other than that, I really didn't have any glitches or issues that I didn't notice also occur in the Dreamcast version. One of those being the speed highway building when you first go to run the building. Even in the Dreamcast version, sometimes I fall off. I don't really know what's going on there. And there are whole videos going over like every little minute detail, the glitches and what changed and things like that. But I doubt most people will encounter a lot of that stuff most of the time. And again, some of it is on the Dreamcast version because I played it again for this playthrough. Now, I want to say on the glitch, I had to go replay the Dreamcast version to get a little bit more footage, and I encountered it on the Dreamcast version as well. And I'm just going to say it how it is, man. A lot of this stuff was probably on the Dreamcast version, but it was more noticeable on DX for whatever reason. I don't really know the technical know-how as to why. Maybe it was the frame rate, I don't know. But the point is, it just wasn't enough to get in the way by playthrough to say that DX was a glitchy game. At least not so much compared to the original game. Now, the textures and the lighting and the way things look, yeah, that did get on my nerves. Look at the jungle and Mystic Ruins here. I mean, first off, the top of it just looks completely butchered. And then you go inside of it, I mean, you can kind of tell where the invisible walls are. In the original, there was like fog everywhere. The texture looked really nice. It actually looked like a nice area. I still don't like the area that much, as you'll see later in the video. I don't really like the jungle area, but it looked nice for the time. It looked like a jungle. It didn't have different tree textures sticking out. It didn't like there were invisible walls or water cutoffs or anything like that. But in the DX version, especially in the Xbox version, you can definitely tell the jungle got worse. What about Red Mountain? I mean, shouldn't it be red and not this brownish orange color that they have? I could keep going on and on with examples like this, but the point is the textures were just better. And even if the lighting system was messed up by the GameCube, which I heard, you still could have just updated the same textures you had instead of making completely new ones that butcher the original art style. DX also has extra features like 60 FPS, which the Dreamcast version ran at 30 FPS. However, sometimes I believe the Dreamcast version was just uncapped because sometimes I feel like it's running at a higher frame rate. In DX, you also have the ability to skip cutscenes, which is vital at points when certain cutscenes replay themselves. There's also a new mission mode, a minigame collection, which is full of Game Gear ports, and an expanded Chao system, and a technically new character, which I'll go over later. Look, I'll always love the Dreamcast version for what it is, but I'll always love the GameCube version, not only because it was the first I played, because it was the first Sonic game I got to sit down and fully beat. So I'll never fully trash it, but I understand if you prefer the OG version. Now, the HD version and the base PC versions are just inexcusable. First off, they didn't bother to give it widescreen support. They took out features like the mini games on the console, and they charged for the DDX content, which is only the missions as DLC. To top it all off, you got this stupid border that you can't remove on the side of the screen. Man, they couldn't even give you actual artwork of the game to put there. And the reason why I'm mad about this is because all the other Dreamcast ports that came to the Xbox and PC all had widescreen support. What was up with this game? I mean, the port is still functional. It's still the DX version. It just had less content. But if you have the PC version, you can get help from the Sonic modding community, which shout out to them, which they were able to restore the old textures and models, add widescreen support, and add the old content back, making it technically the definitive version of the game. However, that's not Sega's work. That's the fans' work. And while I appreciate the Sonic modding community, you guys are awesome, I'm not gonna judge it for the full game because Sega should have done all that. That's a flaw that they made. That's why I play the OG version, I mean the GameCube version. For the OG version, for the most part, because that's what I like to play the most, or I mod it on PC. I do both. With that being said, we got over the ports. Let's get to the actual game now. Sonic's gameplay and story is the foundation of Sonic's adventure. In fact, when you start the game, you can preview the other characters. You can only play as him from the start. And it should be because it's also called Sonic Adventure. But it starts out different from other platformers. Usually games ease you in. Sonic Adventure starts you out with a boss fight, surrounded by cop cars and a creature made up of water. Now what's interesting about this is that demo that the journalist got to play of Sonic Extreme back in the day also was only of a boss fight. Now here we are years later playing this game that was the real start of 3D Sonic fighting a boss. Also, I love these little boss intros they do when they introduce them, where they slowly type out their name. That's so cool. If you played the old Sonic games, you remember Sonic's weakness to water. So now that a boss is made out of that element, it adds to this level of intimidation that legacy players will kind of feel. It's also a pretty cool technical feat by having a moving creature made up of water. And chaos, by its nature, which is this being, is the antithesis of Sonic, being made out of water and hatred and anger and all that stuff. Unfortunately, the guy is kind of a pushover. You can beat this guy in 1 minute. And yeah, he's the first boss. You gotta get used to the controls. It wasn't gonna be hard. But then the next cutscene plays and you find out he's really not dead. And here comes Eggman talking about Chaos, the god of destruction. There's a promise there of more of this new villain with a return of familiarity. And that promise was teased in the intro. Man, they had us lit back in the day. They made it seem like it was the end times happening out here. Angel Island was falling. The world was being flooded. It looked like Eggman was about to take over the city. And we didn't know what the fuck that monster was in the beginning. Like, damn, this shit went hard. And on top of that, you had every single character lock it in to show themselves off in the coolest way possible, man. This whole intro just screamed aura. That was how you introduce somebody into your game. No, that's how you introduce somebody into your franchise. And that familiarity continues if we see Tails and his plane crashing, leading us to the first level. This is where the gameplay really begins. The hardest part of development was getting Sonic's gameplay right in 3D. It took multiple level designs to get the level link and controls right. Now, this is not the classic gameplay translated as some would say, but the fundamentals of that gameplay is still there. That being reaching the goal fast, using the fastest path by manipulating your speed and momentum. The difference is that there aren't the same level design setup as 2D games. So they basically gave Sonic more speed and power to compensate for the new design, and nothing shows this more than the spin dash. I see people say this is just like the classic spin dash, and no, it is not. This is boosted to 11, as if you charge it for a few seconds, you go blasting, especially if you jump. You can do this to gain instant speed over and over again. If you jump out of it, you can jump higher and farther than normal, leading to taking shortcuts like this over the bridge, saving you some time. The spin dash in this game is integral to maintain the highest speed possible during gameplay. Mastering it only cuts down time, but opens so many shortcuts in the levels. Another accommodation for Sonic in 3D was automated movement in areas. What I mean are things like the homing attack, which is designed to make combat easier. Jumping on enemies raw in a 3D space is hard. Much like many games transitioning at the time, they made a targeting feature to make things easier. But the homing attack is utilized to also chain together enemies for traversal. You can even delay it for a bit between jumps or spam it, though if you spam it, sometimes I notice it has a tendency to miss the badniks or end up causing you to get hit, which causes problems. The other form of automation is the spectacle areas, which are now loops or corkscrews. I'm talking about the areas with dash panels, and yet they're automated, but they're also exhilarating. Look, I know some fans hate all the automation, and yeah, the old games didn't have it, but what really happened if you were to slow down the loop? You just got out of it. The biggest change in a loop was after it. Falling out of a corkscrew was more of a punishment to you because you would often fall to a lower level of the stage. However, I think due to collision, I'm pretty sure they made all these sections automated so players don't fall through or break the game in a certain way, because problems like that occur when you're dealing with all this types of collision. 3D offers more problems than 2D, so I'm fine with sections like this being this way. I almost got to mention too that Sonic can naturally run up walls with your speed if you go fast enough. That is really cool and set up some really nice set pieces that you control. So if you worry about it being all automation, don't, because it's not. There's also sections that are action set pieces too, like the whale trying to eat you. Like, I get there's no skill in avoiding it, but Sonic just looks so cool running from it. These segments were in the older games too, more so in Sonic 3, like with the airship in Angel Island. These set pieces just add to the coolness of Sonic. Now when you put all of this together, you get a similar philosophy to the classic games, but in a different style. The level designs are more linear, but it's more focused on the flow state style gameplay, with getting better and faster at it, with Sonic speed being the goal of it. Think like a faster Crash Bandicoot level, which in itself was inspired by Sonic and Donkey Kong, which were inspired by speedrunning Mario levels. I think what is less from the classic games is that there is less to explore, but you really never used to do that outside of finding special stages. It was mostly used because you had multiple playable characters with different abilities, and you were trying to find the fastest route. It wasn't like you were going to find some brand new route that gave you a new boss or level. All those paths would eventually all lead to the same area. Levels in this game, while reused, are more catered to the individual character. I'm not trying to say one is better than the other, but I'm just saying that some of this stuff in the old games were not as expansive or used as it was made out to be, or at least the function of it. That's why I'm fine with the more linear levels in 3D, because at least in this game, because of all the elements they give you, you're always trying to achieve a fast flow state to get out of that level. Levels are even split into acts somewhat at times, though not in the traditional sense. It's just a different area with new music, but it's not like a full separate act. The levels do change, like in Emerald Coast here. Act 1 begins on the boardwalk area, to which later on it's eaten by the well, which you escape, which leads you into the lighthouse and into the cave, which takes you into Act 2, which is more focused on the more tropical side of Emerald Coast, with some small jungles and ponds. The levels tell a story as you go on, just like how Sonic 3 did. Essence of the best parts of the classic games are still here, it just doesn't play exactly like it. That level design though, with Sonic's movement and the spectacle of high-speed moments, is what makes this game play, and there are still alternate paths that just aren't as expansive as in the old games. As the game progresses though, you will see how all these elements elevate Sonic's gameplay. And to top everything off is that classic stage complete jingle mixed with the characters hitting the cool pose and saying something, well, cool at the end of it. They really tried to keep the personality from the old games when they translated it over in 3D. And you'll even see that in the character idle animations too, which also were translated from the 2D games. And they're more varied than them at times, even come with dialogue. I should also mention that the levels do test your speed with the trials. For Sonic at least, his first will revolve around collecting 50 rings, while his second will revolve around beating the level in a certain amount of time. This is where all those shortcuts you find or make with his movement come in handy, and really push your level of mastery of the game. This is Sonic Adventures though, so he gets the most time and thought put into his levels, but that's not to say that the others don't get anything. But back to Sonic's story. His story revolves around stopping Eggman, which is nothing new. The new element is Chaos. After rescuing Tails, he shows Sonic that he has the Chaos Emerald. Now you may notice these cutscenes, and I know they look kind of funny, but at the time these were groundbreaking because there weren't really a console game that had animated cutscenes like this, with this much involved movement, facial expressions, and camera work. Usually games only had one or was in a CGI cutscene. Look at Metal Gear Solid for instance, which had a better cinematic look, but it doesn't have any facial animations like at all. Now it doesn't look perfect, in fact there's plenty of meme material here with how wacky the characters' reactions can be, but they try to go for this more expressive cartoony style, and I think it works. And sometimes it's hilarious with some of the dialogue delivery, like,
Whoa! A Chaos Emerald!
And speaking of the models, I should also talk about the design of the characters, which completely changed when they went into 3D. Now this is also another point of contention in the fandom, even causing drama over the slightest changes like the green eyes. But personally, I like this style for Sonic, especially in the artwork. I like the longer limbs. They look more like teenagers than fat, chubby kids, as they did before. Amy's design got completely changed from her original design, which I still like the original design. I always love the classic designs, but the more modern, sleeker look of the characters made them look cooler and look more like they're from an action cartoon or an action comic compared to how they looked like before. It kind of reminds me of the jump from Dragon Ball to Dragon Ball Z in a way, in terms of how the designs look. Even though there's nothing in the game that really explains why they changed in design, like there's not like a time skip or they grew older, there's nothing like that, it just changed. I don't think it's that big of a deal, but it got so big to where they had to separate both designs, and I'm not going to get into that in this video. The point is, I really like the adventure designs. And yeah, the voice acting is pretty cheesy, but it's one of the charms that the game has. Because when it came to platformers back then, you either had no voice acting, barely any of it, or it was downright terrible at voice acting. I'm looking at you, Mega Man 8 and X4.
Hey, Zach! Why must I fight you? We are not enemies!
Shut up! Crash and Spyro got it right at least. This was around the time of the slow transition of voice acting being taken more seriously in most games, and thankfully Sonic was one of them, with Ryan Drummond bringing his A game for the role. Jaleel White was a previous voice, and while Ryan has a different, more attitude, less starky take on the character, I still appreciate both for what they did. Also, shout out to Dean Bristow as Eggman, rest in peace man. He managed to make a more menacing villain at times. And now back to the story again. Eggman is using Chaos in his latest scheme to take over the world. Chaos can absorb the Chaos Emeralds and evolve, so it's a race to find the Chaos Emerald before Eggman does. There are more developments in the plot, but that's the gist of it for Sonic's story. Pay attention to how I described that and keep that in mind for later on when I discuss the story in full. As you're playing though, you'll go back through the adventure fields. If Sonic Adventure was compared to an RPG, these are like the towns of them, except there are no shops or anything. They are just open areas that lead into other areas, and this is where most of the exploration takes place. If you were to compare it to other platformers, this would be like your Peach's Castle or Warrior Summer Forest. These areas add to the exploration aspect of the game and give you more levels besides the main areas to use your character's abilities. Plus, they have like hub areas of the games, and it's just nice to run around in. At the start, you have access to the city of Station Square and the jungle of the Mystic Ruins. Now, a lot of the Team South America's influence was put into the Mystic Ruins, and you can really tell by its architecture. There are even some landmark areas like Tails Workshop in the Mystic Ruins, or the casino and the hotel and the train station in Station Square. Everything manages to stand out. Also, it's pretty funny, the first hub world in the game is Station Square, which is the city. I know the Starlight Zone in the first game was very peaceful, and there are a couple of good cities in the older titles that aren't necessarily ruled by Eggman or evil, but usually the nature areas of Sonic is where the game starts out in, is where the characters are at peace the most. But here we are in a city full of humans and there's peace. And that's another thing, you're not really gonna find any animorphs or animal-like characters. It's mostly human NPCs, which kind of bothered people at the time, but I don't know, it made the world feel more real to me, even though there's hedgehog characters. I should also mention the design of the levels in the world. I mean, the aesthetics of it. Now, in the old Sonic games, the levels look more alien, like it was a different planet, but in this game, they really went out of their way to try to make it feel like it was something that could be in our world. And that's not to say there aren't any fantastical elements, because there still are, but it's definitely a lot more grounded than it was in, say, the classic Sonic games. And I'm not mad at that. I really like it when they blend both styles together. The mixture is what I like the most. I don't want to keep running through the same checkerboard hills all the damn time, but I felt it was important to go over because that's why you see a lot more humans in these games going forward. And also was a big point of contention in the fan base, but what changed in Sonic isn't a big point of contention in the fan base at this point. Right. But ultimately, I think it serves to make Sonic more relatable to the audience. And maybe this was something that Iizuka and the team were inspired by Knights, when Knights as a character was supposed to be someone you could meet in your dreams. Maybe it was something along the lines where Sonic would be a character that you could probably see in the real world, helping you out or saving the day, much like you see DC superheroes or the Marvel superheroes who stay in places like New York or cities that are located on Earth. And yeah, I know it's fiction, I know it's not real, none of it is really real, but the point of it is to create some sense of relatability. Don't take my full word on that, but I think that's why they made the decision. You can even talk to these NPCs here. Their dialogue changes depending on what's happening at the time of the game, and sometimes you can even meet other playable characters at their different points in the story. It really makes the world feel like it's changing as you go along. The RPG elements are very light, and honestly, it's not even that much of an RPG element and more of an adventure element. In between levels, you may need to pick up a statue that activates a door to a level, or play a mini game, or get one of the upgrades for your characters in the game to progress. That's the thing too. Upgrades are available for all the characters. Each of them will at least have two. One mandatory upgrade for the story, in this case being the light speed dash. Well, in Sonic's case he has two, with the ancient light he'll get later on. And then a secondary upgrade that isn't too substantial, but enhances one of your abilities. In Sonic's case, it's this blue ring that makes charging the light speed dash much quicker, which is used to dash in a lot of rings, to cross over chasms and things like that. For you modern fans out there that aren't used to having to charge the light speed dash in order to use it, it may take a bit to use initially. This is probably the one RPG element of the main game that sticks out, and that's technically not even exclusive to RPGs unless you count it as an upgrade or a level up. Again, when they were developing the game, they wanted to be very light on the RPG elements, but you can still kind of see it here in the structure of the adventure fields and the way you get upgrades. It's these and the combination of the levels that make the gameplay stand out compared to other platformers, especially in its variety.
When we first set out to develop a Sonic 3D game, when we figured out that we needed to take Sonic to the third dimension, we knew that we had to take Sonic to a whole new level. The first question that popped into everyone's mind was, how would Sonic move if he was in 3D? This is the issue that we argued about the most. There was no game like this at the time. What was the best way to show Sonic in 3D? When we built our first test level, we knew we had to test it out, just to make sure our ideas worked. It ended up only lasting about 10 seconds, and we knew we couldn't build a game around this structure. We had to rebuild levels over and over again until we finally had a level length that we were happy with. There was one more issue that we had to tackle, and that was the issue of the camera work. Now, normally in 3D games, the camera follows behind the character, and this is really the most basic style of camera work. But no matter what we tried, We couldn't get the same sensation of speed as the 2D games by doing this. We needed to figure out a different way to convey this sensation of speed. So, after extensive research on the matter, we discovered that the key really was in the camera system. We decided to develop a more dynamic camera system, one that showed Sonic from many angles rather than just from behind, to emphasize the speed at which he moved. We went back and implemented the camera system, and we really discovered that it made all the difference. Figuring out these two things, how to make Sonic move in a 3D environment, and what camera angles to use to emphasize his speed, were our two biggest challenges. We wanted to build something nobody had ever seen before. These challenges were much more difficult than we originally anticipated, but we feel that we accomplished the goals that we set for ourselves. In previous 2D Sonic games, players could easily and comfortably bounce off the heads of their enemies, and that really was part of the fun. The question was, how do you do this in 3D? That's when we thought of targeting enemies while in the air. By doing this, players can bounce off one enemy, and then target the next, and then the next, and then the next. This really allows players to enjoy the same speedy attacks they had in the 2D Sonic games in a whole new 3D world. We needed several attacks and several ways to emphasize his speed. We had already thought of the homing attack, but we really didn't think this was enough. We needed one more attack, one more idea to really capture the sensation of speed. We gave it much thought, and that's when we thought of the light attack. This attack turned Sonic into a blur, really making it feel like the player is moving at Sonic's speeds. We enjoyed this attack so much that we decided to make it a staple in the Sonic Adventure series, and it made a comeback for Sonic Adventure 2.
Now that's one aspect I don't see people appreciate with Sonic Adventure that much. It's variety. And I don't mean the other characters, I mean even in Sonic's campaign. So after defeating another piss-easy boss against Eggman, you're sent into the Windy Valley. And instead of just being another level where you run around safely, and about a little ways into the level, a tornado appears and sucks you into it, changing the whole dynamics of the level. Now you have to escape the tornado by climbing out of it. And once you escape, you end up in a whole new area of that level that's completely in the open sky. Or what about the next level, Casinopolis, which is a carryover from the Casino Night area from Sonic 2. Except here, you're forced to play the pinball because you need 400 rings to reach the emerald of that stage, unless you can find a way up there in some glitch way. You can either play the Sonic pinball game or the Knights pinball game, which is my favorite because all the Knights love in this part of the stage. When you're really good at the pinball is amazing. Sonic Team always pushed Knights with Sonic, and it was like the only other IP they would make crossover with him constantly. I used to think they took place in the same world. Maybe they can, in a way, I don't know. You guys let me know in the comments how you would feel about that. I would love to see a crossover of the two someday that's not just a complete Sega crossover. Then there's the third option, which is fail the pinball minigame and be taken to the sewers, where there are plenty of rings to get. Some people may not like this though because of that shakeup in dynamics of the goal, but I honestly love it because it made the level stand out, and I love playing pinball in these games, man. I love playing pinball in general. Even the next level, Ice Cap, which was just straight up name ripped from Sonic 3 and is technically the exact same location from Sonic 3, adds something different. You can go from briefly exploring the snow hills and into the depths of the ice caves to snowboarding downhill from an avalanche, except unlike Sonic 3, you actually get to control it and do cool tricks off ramps that are radical. As you can see, Sonic Adventure tries to give you something different in each level, and each progression into each level feels like something new. I feel like this was their way of implementing some of the strong level variety and gimmicks of the classic games, especially from Sonic 3, which is what they should be taking from. Now at this point you meet Knuckles, and anytime you meet a character in a cutscene, you unlock them in their story. Knuckles got tricked again by Eggman, so you fight him, and this is where I talk about the boss fights for a bit. The Sonic Adventure's boss fight, for the most part, are a complete joke. Besides the final boss of each story, there are a couple of bosses that may have something tricky, they may be a little bit cool, but for the most part, you can kind of kill them easily. And these rival fights are the worst out of all of them. They are complete jokes. This is what it is.
Oh no! Oh no!
Yeah, this is where that meme comes from. Because these guys put up no fight at all. Now after you beat Knuckles, it's obviously revealed that Eggman tricked Knuckles and he feeds the emeralds to Chaos, and now you have to fight Chaos 4, which means you have to fight Chaos 4 as Sonic, and then you're gonna have to fight him as Tails in his campaign, and then you're gonna fight him again as Knuckles in his campaign, which means you have to fight this boss 3 times. And it wouldn't be so bad if you didn't have to wait on this boss. Chaos 4 isn't hard. You just have to sit on these lily pads and wait for him to get out of the water just so you can attack him. And you gotta do this 3 freaking times. This part of the game just sucks. Did nobody sit and think maybe it was just too tedious to make players do? If this was one fight by itself, or maybe the dynamics of the fight changed depending on the character, it'd be different. But no, it's the same exact bullshit with 3 different characters. The only thing that carries it is the story. Because you see, after this, Eggman reveals his other trump card, the Egg Carrier. His new fortress. And at this point, I was like, whoa, we gotta take that thing down. However, nowadays I just look back at things like the Death Egg and compare the Egg Carrier to that. And while the battleship looks really cool, when you really think about it, this is just another Tuesday for Sonic and Tails. After seeing the Fortress of Doom in the sky, Knuckles, after causing all this mess, just fucks off. And Sonic and Tails head onto the tornado to chase it down, leading us to another form of gameplay, the minigames. You technically already did it with the snowboarding earlier, as it was one of them. Now you're in the tornado, which is reminiscent of the Sky Chase levels from Sonic 2, except it's an on-rail shooter instead of Sonic jumping on enemies. I think this level is actually pretty cool going around the battleship, but it's a part of the same problem as the Chaos 4 fight, where you have to replay this thing, or at least do a section of this thing 4 times, because there's 2 times you do it in Sonic campaign, and then there's 2 more times you do it in Tails campaign, and you can't control the pace of it, so you're just at the game's pace in Mercy, and it's again pretty slow. So on the first time, or the first 2 times, the second time is different, it's fine. On the 4th time, it's a bit agitating, and knowing you have to do this in hindsight is even more agitating. Now at the end of this, Eggman fires a giant laser out of the Egg Carrier, shooting the duo out of the sky, separating them, and Sonic landing back in Station Square where he meets Amy. I got more to say about her later, but I'll save it for her section. Amy forces him on a date while also getting him to protect her from this robot chasing her, and Sonic ends up in the Twinkle Park, another level that has gimmicks that involves mini games. I feel like these next 2 levels drive my spectacle at home. Here you start out in another mini game with the kart racing, and then end up on a roller coaster, then you're finally able to run around an amusement park. All of these seem to take away from the traditional gameplay, but they add to the theme of the level of it being, well, an amusement park, which that stuff takes up half of it. The real highlight here though is the next level, Speed Highway, aka the best level in the game. It takes place on massive highways in the sky. The level gives you enough room to speed around it, running on the side of buildings, up and down and all around as you're chased by cop car robots. You even get to ride on a helicopter from buildings at a point. But the highlight of the spectacle has to be running down the giant skyscraper. You break out the window and just start running down this huge skyscraper all the way to the bottom of the city. There's no challenge here, no major obstacles, momentum, platform to overcome. You just need to dodge pipes and helicopters. But man, it feels badass running down this thing, and it never gets old. It's just something exhilarating. The spectacle of these games add to the speed of the gameplay, and it just gives me hype to continue through the stage. Then once you reach the bottom of the city, it's all peaceful and it's daytime, contrasting the constant action at nighttime. Usually levels start safe and end dangerous, but this was a reversal, and it works so well, man. Having levels switch up like this is why I love the level design of this game. Plus there's a secret area like this building here. If you jump on this building to the left at the beginning of the stage and you spin dash up here, there's an item up here that gives you an extra life. Why was that there? I don't know, but they planned it out for you to go there. It doesn't really make the level faster, but it's just something extra for exploration. By the way, this is what I meant in my Frontiers video when I talked about that Sonic always had levels that just had like random shit in the sky. Now it looks cool here and it works because it's different highways, so you imagine these highways are above the city, but could you imagine like giant highways actually above the city, like you're on the ground and There's these massive highways just at the same level as skyscrapers. We really don't have that in real life, but that'd be kind of scary, right? Imagine if like a car crash happened and someone's driving on the road and they fall off and they die and explode, and you're just sitting there out the window looking at that. It'd be crazy. I'm going on too much of a ramble. But back to the game. Now after this, the Perspective takes a backseat as the last set of Sonic levels become more challenging with their own gimmicks. Amy gets kidnapped by the robot and taken to the egg carrier, and Sonic gives chase to the Red Mountain, which is on Angel Island. And I think this area is where Lava Core is supposed to be from Sonic 3. Before you reach this, you get a second upgrade, the Ancient Light, which makes so the light speed dash can attack enemies. All of his upgrades revolve around this one move, which I kind of feel like they could have just been given at once, and it could have given us something else, like I don't know, a bounce bracelet. Maybe I'm looking too much into the future with that one. Now the other question is, why is Angel Island on the ground? Well, we have to find it out in Knuckles' story. Red Mountain has the most open paths out of any of Sonic's level in the game, and again, it's never anything too crazy. It's usually short, faster paths that get you to areas quicker, but it gives that illusion of this giant mountain area being open. And once you go underground through the level, it shifts in dealing with this rising lava gimmick with this tight space until you escape, which leads you into another tornado section with Tails, now with the upgraded tornado. Again, I don't mind this section. I like it more than the first one, but you have to play it twice, and this style having to be played back to back for most players is just a bit asinine. So it's one of the weaker areas for me at least, but it does have its cool boss fight with you destroying the cannon that shot you down before. Another interesting note about these tornado sections, if you're playing the Dreamcast version, you may notice that the models are different from the models in the game. This is because they actually used some of the Saturn work they used, or they had made for the original Sonic Adventure that was going to be on the Sega Saturn. And so the models are like Saturn models or the models from Sonic Jam. What's even funnier though is if they have a close-up shot on the Dreamcast version, Sonic will have his Dreamcast model head, but his body will be the model of the Saturn Sonic model. Probably so when you zoomed in, you wouldn't notice the lower resolution model on the plane. But if you play the DX version, it just stays as the DX model. Now you've entered the Egg Carrier, which turns out to be an adventure field itself, the third and final adventure field. You think that it'd have enemies and stuff, but no, they saved that for the levels. By the way, what I like about the cutscenes here, and it shows how cool the facial expressions are, is that when they initially land, Sonic is shocked by the egg carrier, and then Tails just looks at him like whatever. And then the egg carrier changes form, and then Tails is shocked by the thing changing form and states, "Whoa, did you see that? It changed," after having to watch a whole cutscene of it change, and Sonic just looks at him like, "Really, dude?" Like, it's little things like that in the cutscenes that really make these cutscenes stand out, man. Like, I just can't get mad at these facial expressions, bro. They're hilarious. Now with the egg carrier morph, you can now enter the Sky Deck, one of my favorite levels, which plays with the wind and gravity while you're being shot at by these big laser cannons, all while trying to avoid falling out of the sky. It's an awesome level that shows out the massive scale of the battleship while also increasing the difficulty of the stages. Out of all the characters, only Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles go to the stage, while the other three go to a different stage that I'll mention later on. Also, if you're good enough, you can actually avoid this gravity gimmick at the last part of the stage by spin dashing up to the goal area. Once out of there, Sonic and Tails find Amy and are confronted by a new robot, Gamma. He is shockingly, for the first time, another playable character who is an Eggman robot, but I'll go over him in his section. For now, Sonic and him fight in another easy rival fight, but Amy steps up to save him at the last minute so Sonic doesn't fully destroy him. During this, Eggman steals a Chaos Emerald that Amy Bird had and gives it to Chaos, transforming him into Chaos 6. This is the last time you fight Chaos in Sonic's story, and it's the most menacing version of him. At least, if you didn't know how to cheese him by throwing the ice bombs at him whenever he opens his mouth. He has all these new abilities, but ultimately he can die pretty fast like the last Chaos forms. And 3 boss fights with him being a complete jobber, that's kind of an L for Chaos, isn't it? Okay, he's not really a complete joke in this fight, because again, he has some cool, unique attacks, but I mean, if you know what you're doing with the ice, you can freeze him and knock him out really quick. Oh, and Sonic meets Big here, my goat. After this, Sonic pursues Eggman down all the way to the ground as the egg carrier falls out of the sky.
I hate Eggman.
He lands in front of the temple and enters the lost world being guided by some sort of light. That light is the tutorial light that you may have noticed throughout the game. If you go near it, she'll give you different instructions on how to progress, on where to go, things like that. But in the game, it serves a deeper purpose, and it all ties to places connected to the past, like the Lost World. This level reminds me of Indiana Jones with all the booby traps and temple puzzles going on, the big one being the giant snake that you have to raise with the water in order to progress. It's also the slowest part of the stage, but it contrasts with the next part of the stage, which is more hectic with boulders and dark rooms that need lights to show the path, along with dodging fire arrows and running up the walls that you have to activate. This stage is one of the most unique in terms of level obstacles and architecture. This is where most of the South American trip inspiration was put into, if there was a single action stage where it was put into. Now when you reach the end, you see a mural of a monster, the same monster you see in the intro of the game. Sonic is then teleported by the ball of light. Now, if you play Sonic 3, some of this stuff may look familiar, like the Emerald Altar and the way the murals are designed. And that is because this is the past of Angel Island. Before it was in the sky, except now it's burning, full of corpses of Chao. This was the first flashback sequence that each character goes through. All of these relate to Chaos and the orange echidna Tikal, who is the ball of light. I'm going to ignore it for now because every character kind of says, "Whoa, what was that?" and ignores it afterwards. Sonic is too focused on Eggman's new base, which is where the last level takes place, the final egg. By the way, if anyone could tell me how this puzzle works, please let me know. I just kind of wing it every time. I never know how it's supposed to be solved. There's different little buttons and then all of a sudden I'm opening it. Now this level is Eggman's last stand. It's full of robots and death traps waiting to kill you, as well as a few elevators. Waiting is also in this evil plan. How vile. Besides the enemies, I never found this stage too hard. I thought Skylack was a harder stage with more danger to it, with you being able to fall out of the sky and everything. But you see, the real threat here is Sonic's final boss, the Egg Viper. This thing as a kid stomped me. Its initial attacks were not hard, but waiting to damage it is. Sometimes you can miss the homing attack and just fall to your death, having to restart the whole fight. And after a certain point, Eggman changes up the dynamic and start removing parts of the stage and throwing discs at you. You have to damage him by hopping on the disc and hitting him. It's all tense, just like how a final boss should be. And when you beat him, Eggman has one last trick up his sleeve. This freaking move, man, used to kill me so much as a kid. I never knew how to dodge it, but you have to stand on one platform and wait till the last minute to run away, letting him explode by himself. The funny part about it is if he hits you, it doesn't even destroy the platform. It just knocks you back, killing you as well. What a freaking bastard, man. It's so petty. Of course, that's in line with the character. But with that and Eggman's defeat, Sonic's adventure is complete and peace is restored. Now, I went through all this to really show that even in Sonic's campaign, this game had variety, and that was to really keep the player on its toes throughout each of its encounters and each of its levels. That philosophy wasn't just left on the other characters, it was also imprinted onto Sonic, who arguably has the most playtime in the game. It's kind of like those platformers that have the main playable character and then they'll have like a vehicle stage or some other playable characters on the side. The difference is the presentation, because in Sonic Adventure, the other characters each had their own different stories, so it makes it feel like they're a lot different, but in reality, it's the same style because Sonic, or the main character, is the one that gets most of the screen time and most of the gameplay. A Sonic story in itself isn't really anything that's groundbreaking. Sonic was always a character you wanted to be, not really somebody that went through a lot of things, at least at this point in the games. Now in the comics it was a different story, but he was still cool in his actions and the stuff that he said, so that made the character appealing even if he didn't really go through like a character arc. In fact, he's actually changing the other characters around him instead of he himself changing. And speaking of other characters, let's get into those other characters now.
We first set out to make Sonic Adventure. There had been such a jump in the hardware that we really wanted to make a more realistic world and more realistic environments for the next Sonic game. We really wanted something closer to the world that we were all imagining inside our heads when we set out to make the design. And even though we wanted to create this realistic world, none of us had ever actually seen environments like ruins or jungles. We'd all seen them in movies, but none of us had ever seen them in real life. So, we thought that in order to create a more realistic world for Sonic, the first and foremost step would be to actually see these environments with our own eyes. So, the core members of the Sonic Adventure development team, including myself, decided that we needed to go on a trip to Central and South America. If anything, we knew that there, at those locations, we would find at the very least inspiration to create more realistic environments for our Sonic Adventure game. We visited the jungles, the ruins, temples, and beaches in Cancun, Guatemala, and even Peru. We saw everything with our own eyes, and we ended up taking a lot of pictures as well. But that just wasn't to get a better feel for the environments. It wasn't to take pretty pictures home with us. We actually used these pictures as textures in the game to create more realistic environments. For instance, for the rocks and the jungle walls in some of the levels, those are actually pictures taken on our trip. And we feel that this helped create a certain sense of realism in the game that never existed in any previous Sonic game. The inspiration and the pictures that we took on our trip really helped add to the quality of Sonic Adventure.
Tails' gameplay is very similar to Sonic, except he has to race Sonic across one part of a level that Sonic goes through. His story revolves around him standing out from Sonic's shadow, but that unfortunately affects his gameplay as well. You see, most of Tails' campaign is just Sonic campaign all over again. Yes, even the slow parts, except stripped down and rushed. Now his movements is near perfect for Tails, as his flight was transferred over very well from his 2D counterpart. As long as you don't hold the A button, you can stay in the air without losing energy, but you will fall down slowly. If you hold the A button too long, you're just going to drop out of the sky with no flight. He can even upgrade his flight with an upgrade that he gets that boosts his flight time, which you can get immediately. He can't homing attack, but he has tailspin attack, and that also has an upgrade. It's just unfortunate that all of this is barely utilized in his campaign. I mean, it's useful in the adventure field. You can reach higher areas that you could not reach with Sonic. However, Tails' action stages are where the problems occur. The Valley, for instance, is just the last section of it, which allows for some extra areas of flight. However, the level goes downward and you can stay flying as long as you don't hold the jump button. So you can pretty much fly over the whole stage if you know how to. I know that's more of a knowledge exploit, but it's so easy to do, I feel like it's pointless to play the level regularly if you know what you're doing. There are these little flight boosters they add in the levels when you play as Tails. They obviously added those things so that you can use them to fly around, but I mean, it's not as quick as just flying over the whole stage. Then there's Casino-opolis, which traps you only in the sewer area of the stage. You know, the enclosed short area where Tails' flight is pretty much useless because you're at the mercy of these enclosed environments and these wind machines. I mean, could they not just make a whole brand new underground area? I get it, he's a little kid, maybe he doesn't want to gamble. Okay, have that. But could they not make a little underground area that fits Tails' abilities? Ice Cap is just the snowboarding section. No flight at all. Sky Deck is only the first section, which does allow more space for his flight, but it could have been expanded with the rest of the battleship. They could have at least used that second section, man. That would have been nice to see. Only Speed Highway truly utilizes Tails' flight ability, but it's also the last level of his campaign. And it's awesome because he gets new areas where he can fly between skyscrapers. But that's it. That's the only area that really gets this treatment. Tails even gets one bonus level with Sand Hill, but it's just another snowboarding, or in this case, sandboarding level. And he still has to repeat the chaos fight and the tornado stages, and that's it. Oh, and his trials are pretty much the same as Sonic. Collect 50 rings and race a quote-unquote faster version of the opponent, which is similar to just beat the stage faster. So it's nothing new. And that's the problem with the campaign. It's just the underutilization of Tails' ability. It's not that it's short or that it even repeats most of Sonic's story, since that's the point of Tails' story in itself. It's just that there's not enough here to flesh Tails' abilities out enough. And now to go into deeper detail on what I'm talking about, although there were some drawbacks to Tails' gameplay in the earlier Sonic games, for instance Sonic 2 not having his ability to fly when you play as him alone, or in Sonic Chaos where you couldn't click the Chaos symbols, you still got to play through all the stages. Hell, in some games he would even get extra sections that Sonic wouldn't get at all, and that would be without his flight, like in Triple Trouble when he got the submarine. Tails even received his own spin-offs like Tails Adventure, which is his own different game, being this Metroidvania game where you use different gadgets and vehicles that he made in order to fight these bird guys. I have to make a video on that game at a point. But the point is, while those elements are there in the story, like Tails building a tornado and his technical skills saving the day in the cutscene, they aren't really shown in the action stages. and instead they're cut up in tiny bits. I don't have a problem with him racing Sonic or Eggman because that actually helps the story they're trying to tell. In fact, it's kind of like you're playing as the second player in the original games, except now you have the camera on you and you're not dying all the time being respawned. But I think the levels could have been made longer. I don't even mind if there's 5 levels, but they could have made them longer. They could have made more extra seconds for Tails. It just feels like they cut out a lot that could have been done with the character, especially when he moves so well in this game. Now, the story, at least the original parts of it, is awesome. At the point of the separation, Tails reminisces about meeting Sonic, and he realizes that he on his own has to do what he can to help Sonic now. So he tracks down the Chaos symbol and uses it to build Tornado 2 and power it up, which is why he appears at the end of Sonic's Red Mountain. The real payoff though, is at the end, where after taking Amy off the egg carrier, Tails sees Eggman about to blow up Station Square with a freaking nuke. With no one around to stop him, he has to step up and take down Eggman by himself, with having to race Eggman to disarm Eggman's missile in the speed highway. It's the only change in opponent that you will see in his regular gameplay. Then Eggman confronts him in his new machine, the giant Egg Walker. And this confrontation always made Tails like a badass, man.
You fool. Away, before I make mincemeat out of you.
I'm not scared. I'm not scared. I can do this!
The trope of an underdog or fearful or young character having to gain courage to stop a bigger threat or the main threat will never get old. In this case, it's Tails fully stepping out of Sonic's shadow and becoming his own hero as he uses his tailspin to take down Eggman's Egg Walker and drive Eggman out of Station Square. Tails' campaign is really carried by these original parts of his story and the adventure feels. If not for that, it would be even worse. And to be honest, it's probably the worst campaign in the game because of its repetition and the lack of utility of Tails' abilities. There's so much missed potential here. When I think about it though, Tails was probably meant to be the easy mode of the game. When I was younger and I got stuck in Sonic's story, I would be able to progress further in Tails' story fast. Tails was also meant to be the easy mode in the earlier games too because of his flight. Hell, some games would even remove mechanics just to make his playthrough easier. It just sucks that his levels took a hit when it came to that. And we got butchered versions of Sonic's levels. I think this part could have been done much better, and his campaign would have been much better for it. However, I should point out that while the adventure element is the thing that's saving it, it's also just as important to Sonic Adventure as the action-based stages. While new to Sonic games at the time, these elements are natural to games like RPGs, like exploration and talking to NPCs. Tails' abilities excel at this, especially when you go into the past with him. But I want to save that detail for later on, so I'll continue talking about the other characters. I know I've been pretty hard on Tails, but that's just because the action stages are just as important as the exploration, and I see the potential there that could have been corrected with a different mindset. However, the next character embodies that exploration element very well.
As far back as I can remember, I've been living here on this dark island, always guarding the Master Emerald from anything that could harm it. I don't know why I was given this job, why it was my fate. Destined to be here forever.
Knuckles has always been an interesting character since his introduction. Being the first real rival to Sonic, he became very popular, receiving solo games, episodes in the cartoons, and even a comic line that expanded his story. In fact, him and Angel Island were used to expand the lore of the series, regardless of the iteration. I mean, even in the spin-offs, there would be locations that would have echidna architecture. There was a history that would be explored, and Sonic Adventure would take that and explore it even further. And I mean, they changed so much that they had to rewrite things in the comics just to match the game. The funny thing is, Knuckles, despite having so much revealed to him, doesn't really care about it. That's because he's too worried about the Master Emerald.
What the? What's going on here? Oh no! Something's happened to the Master Emerald!
It all started here. When Eggman broke the Master Emerald, it released Chaos and caused Angel Island to fall. Now Knuckles has to track down the pieces of the Master Emerald, which have all been scattered across the world. Now why would the pieces of the Master Emerald land in some of these locations? Well, let me ask you this. Why do the Dragon Balls land in some of these locations after they use them? They're just magical items, bro. They just spread out to wherever. It doesn't really matter where it lands. Now Knuckles gameplay is the first derivative from the standard goal-based gameplay and consists of you hunting 3 pieces of the Master Emerald in each stage. Now why is this done? I honestly think it was done because it utilizes his moveset better than the goal-based stages of Sonic and Tails. I mean, if you look at Sonic's levels, there isn't much to climb or glide on to that isn't flyable or get you there fast. When the levels are presented in this format, Knuckles just gets more room to use his abilities and more room to explore. Look at Speed Highway and Casinopolis, for instance. Now that you can climb and glide in Speed Highway, the buildings that were once a big obstacle to traverse in Sonic stage are now easily scalable and more used to explore to find more emerald pieces. Casinopolis now has a whole upper area that only Knuckles can access, which has a pirate ship and a lion, and some more areas up there that only his abilities would allow entry for. There's even this giant Sonic statue that you can destroy because remember,
Unlike Sonic, I don't chuckle. I'd rather flex my muscles.
Yeah, so unlike Tails, these levels seem to be catered more around his abilities that feel more fleshed out. The problem with Tails wasn't the reuse of levels or even repeating some of the order of Sonic's levels. It was instead the fact that Tails' specificity was not used, and maybe that was because his gameplay didn't really require it. And if you think that these levels aren't fast, think again, because the radar, which almost immediately goes off for every emerald you are just a slightest bit close to, helps you be able to find those emerald pieces quickly. In fact, the game outright encourages you to find them quickly, or you can take your time digging deep into the level. And speaking of digging, that's Knuckles' major upgrade in his campaign. He gains the ability to dig, which in turn allows him to dig for Master Emerald pieces. There isn't much to dig for outside of that. There's some rings and maybe some extra lives here and there. Maybe you'll find something else, but you never know unless you are searching for an emerald piece or just digging out of nowhere, which you have to sit completely still for. Now the level that you first get to use this in is the Red Mountain, which is awesome. Now all of the alternative pathways are open to you as you have the whole mountain area to glide around and climb up and explore. I wish he had another big gigantic level like this, but at least his other stages still feel like they hold up to his playstyle, unlike Tails. Now back to Knuckles' story. Even though Knuckles' goal is getting the Master Emerald pieces, he still runs into trouble with Chaos and the backstory of his people. In fact, all of the Knuckles boss fights are only with Chaos, with him getting an exclusive boss fight against Chaos 2, where you can knock away his blob form by gliding into it. From there, you know what happens. Knuckles gets tricked by Eggman into thinking that Sonic has Master Emerald pieces, then it was all a trap and he has to fight Chaos 4, which means he has to fight him again. Thankfully, this is the last time. Again, this is the only section where reusing something is terrible. But besides boss fight, Knuckles is also confronted by the story by having the most flashback or past sequences in the game. Makes sense because he should be the most connected to the events of the past, but even he comes out of these confused for a few seconds and then just goes back to his main objective. Hold that for later in the video. Knuckles is also the only character outside of Sonic who goes to the Lost World level, which is a level connected heavily to the past sequences, with his stage taking place right before the goal area of Sonic, allowing you to bypass most of the temple's puzzles with Knuckles' abilities. Now this is pretty interesting because it's assumed that Knuckles' people made this temple, so of course they would just be able to just say screw it to all the traps they added into the stage, because their abilities like climbing and gliding would be ways to overcome these obstacles easily. Now I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but this game was originally called the Sonic and Knuckles RPG, so it makes sense that these two would be the most connected to the central plot. I wish they would react to it more in their stories, I guess, but that probably is the point considering what happens in the end. Knuckles gets the second past sequence, but then he's sent back to the Emerald Altar after it, where most of the emerald pieces have been returned, the last of them being on the egg carrier. It's here where we get Knuckles' last stage. Wait a minute. Eggman has a pool in this thing? Bro built all these luxuries just for this thing to be shot down and never used again outside of this game, man. Damn. I know why Eggman gets so mad at these characters, man. Anyway, Knuckles' last stage is the Sky Deck, and it's notable for one thing. You see, you have to move the lever around to change position of gravity on the ship, which means he was the one doing that on Sonic's level. Man, that's so cool of a nod, and pretty funny in retrospect that dude was moving the ship around just to find its emerald shekels, causing the other characters to suffer in the process. That's something that Knuckles would do without even knowing. Once getting the last pieces of the emerald, Knuckles gets taken to the past one more time just to prove again that Chaos is a serious threat.
Hey, what happened here?
I couldn't stop them. They came, and my father... I had no idea how bad this would turn out. I'm shocked.
Look! It's the emerald! Wait!
But after returning to the present, he just looks at it and thinks about it a little bit more, but again just goes, that's crazy, and ignores it until Chaos 6 appears in front of his face. And now he wants to do something about it. And I've been saving it for this moment, but let's talk about combat. You see, Knuckles gets a punch combo that he can use on his enemies, but he also gets an upgrade later on called the Power Gloves. If you hold the punch button for a while, it will charge and Knuckles will attack and destroy all enemies near him. It's supposed to be good for this fight. I only use it when playing the Dreamcast version though, and it does do some more damage than damaging him regularly when you freeze him with the ice bombs. And honestly, I never used it that much when I first played this game, and I still barely use it now. Combat is not forced outside of a few occasions where a Master Emerald piece may end up inside of a badnik or an enemy, and you don't need it for this fight as it plays nearly the same as Sonic's. But it's still pretty cool they allowed you to have that with Knuckles, since he also doesn't have a homing attack. Once beaten, Knuckles thinks he has beaten Chaos for good and returns to Angel Island and restores the Master Emerald.
I'll probably be on this floating island forever. Guarding the Master Emerald again. I may not know the whole story behind this, but perhaps it's better that way. I'm at peace once more.
Like I said, even the guy with the most importance to the past doesn't care about the past. We will go deeper into that in the final story. Overall, I like Knuckles' treasure hunting gameplay, if not just for the exploration side of it. The game even encourages you to go faster with it and explore with the trials for him, which include beating it without hints from the call, which you could get in every level, and beating some stages in under a minute. Now, you can abuse this because restarting the Sonic Adventure restarts you at a checkpoint, which in this case is the Emerald piece. Still, them wanting you to know the areas and beat them fast is a philosophy of the other gameplay, but there's just no goal-based objective to it. And while I did like doing that in the 2D games, if this is what is needed to be done to get the most out of Knuckles' abilities in 3D, then I'm definitely here for it. Amy's inclusion in this game is interesting because back then, outside of Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and Eggman, Sega did not know what they wanted to do with the series lore-wise. Now, I made arguments in my old classic videos about the old games building up in story, but that was the games, and it wasn't like people were analyzing everything back then and even knew what some of this stuff meant. The stories were still very simple, but there were a lot of cool visuals in the background that could imply different things, like the tikis in Green Hill or the murals in the Hidden Palace stage. That meant most people back then got their stories from either the cartoons or the comics, which there was 3 different cartoons and 2 comic series, one for Europe under Fleetway and one for America under Archie. And each and every one of them had their own story and set of characters. Not to get too much into detail on all of them, but one of the main ones was the female character being changed. In America, both the Saturday cartoon and Archie had Sally as the love interest character. She was also in the manual of Sonic CD, even though it was actually Amy, they called her Princess Sally. And in the initial plans for Sonic Extreme, there was going to be a new female character called Tiara Bombowski, who never got to see the light of day outside of the conception stages. Now, while Amy would appear in the Archie comics, eventually as a child fangirl of Sonic, it was Fleetway they put Amy in the role that she was supposed to be in, similar to the games, which was good on their part because she was meant to stay. And this game showed that, even though she would appear in a couple of spin-offs. By the way, I'm not getting on this adaptation. The Archie comics had to eventually age her up and make her more prominent because of the game. But it's really Sega's fault again for not emphasizing the characters they wanted to use. And to be fair, when they made Saturday M and Archie and all that, it was in early 1993 before Amy even got introduced. So it's not their fault that this happened. This was a common thing amongst game companies back then. Cartoon cartoons and comics were just advertising. It was just luck that Sonic would have one that would go on for so long and be so defining for its character. This would cause plenty of debate in the fandom if the other changes in this game didn't already cause plenty of debate in the fandom. But enough of that. The point is, she's here now and she's here to stay. Now, Amy's story revolves around her finding a bird and protecting it from this robot named Zero. No, if it was that Zero, she'd probably be dead. This is attached to her gameplay, where Zero will appear from time to time to attack you. The good thing is Amy is equipped with her Pico hammer and can attack Zero, disabling him for a bit. Her biggest problem though is her mobility. Amy is slower than the previous cast and is noticeable, but I don't think that's a problem. Amy still runs fast for a platformer character, just not as fast as Sonic, and her levels are more focused on platforming and puzzles. She also has this hammer jump that she can do while running that gives her a higher jump, and when you time it right, it can lead different shortcuts in the level, and you can keep popping up in the air when you land with it. No, you see, the problem is just building up her speed. Amy takes a bit to build up her max speed unlike the others, and sometimes she can just stop if you aren't holding the analog stick fully in one direction, like turning or a camera change, and it kills all of your build up. If you try long jumping or using this hammer jump in this mode, it won't work, so you have to be in a run state for it to work. I think this is what makes her gameplay feel weak. I don't mind playing as a character like this because the level design is accommodated for it, but the way she has to build up speed annoys me, especially when she loses it out of nowhere sometimes. If that was fixed, I feel like it'd be more tolerable. Now, I still enjoy most of her campaign. In fact, her first two levels are some of my favorite of hers in the game. Her Twinkle Park has her going inside the castle and avoiding the traps inside. There is this cool mirror section that messes me up control wise, but it's always a cool visual to see. Then there's the hot shelter, the last level and exclusive level to the last set of characters in the game. This was made for her gameplay entirely. You got plenty of sections for her hammer jump, especially in the end with the ladder and factory areas. When you master that, you can basically speed run the level with it. Plus there's tons of extra details here, like in the Casino-opolis level, which I didn't mention before, but there's these bathrooms in the Casino-opolis here where Sonic can take a shower, and there's the little unique animation for that. But in the hot shelter here, you can go to the bathroom. No, literally, you can go to the bathroom, and she won't sit down and go to the bathroom, but you can break every stall in the bathroom and jump on the toilets, which I find pretty funny. The only issue with this stage is the puzzles. Even as a kid, they slowed down the gameplay for me. It's just that they're so simple, but they're boring. It's place a color cube in a color space and then do it again, except this one is higher than the other ones. Oh boy. Why not have one of these and have it be like in the center of the level and have the whole level be based around that giant puzzle instead of just having these small, very simple puzzles that even a toddler could solve. I mean, I guess that's the point, but you know, it would have been better and more entertaining for even us back then if it had much more involvement than just place color block here. But besides that, the hot shelter is still an amazing level, especially for Amy's movement. Her last level though, the final egg, feels like an afterthought compared to the first two. It's much shorter, and its only major standout feature is this guessing minigame room puzzle, which is kind of a letdown compared to the previous robust level. That's right, she only has 3 levels in her campaign. It's very short. If you don't like her, you don't have to play as her that long. And speaking of her story, it's nice. I know in some games around this time, Amy could be seen as a fangirl only, but in this one, it's mostly about her standing out on her own, much like Tails did, and going on her own adventure, except her gameplay and her levels actually stood out, unlike Tails did. Her only time being love obsessed is when she's reminiscing on Sonic CD, and when she sees Sonic for the first time.
Oh, Sonic! My hero!
But it barely happens. She even gets kidnapped, but gets herself out by convincing one of Eggman's robots, Gamma, to let her go and escape through the hot shelter, which in turn help reforms Gamma, but not before playing a mini game first, in which she has to smack her hammer in a whack-a-mole style game at the Sonic plushies and avoid the Eggman ones. Now, why did Eggman place all this specific shit on the ship? This hammer mini game is how you get both of Amy's power-ups, the hammer spin and the long hammer. I did not use the hammer spin at all. There are no puzzles for it, and it's not needed for combat. It has a cute little animation if you use it too much, where Amy gets dizzy, but outside of that, that's pretty much all it's used for. And I got the long hammer after beating the story, so it's mostly just used in her trial missions and kinda helped in combat. Her power-ups are nothing special that really help her, and besides, they don't really do nothing to Zero in the stages either. It's not like something that knocks them away like fart or something like that. And again, if you hit them too much, he'll become invincible. Anyway, it's revealed that the bird has a Chaos Emerald, which is why Eggman wanted it and took its family. So after escaping the egg carrier, Amy goes by herself with the bird at night to Eggman's base, presumably at the same time that Sonic does, but she doesn't know that, to find the bird's family. And even when she doesn't find them, she heads back to the egg carrier of all places by herself, where she finds the bird's family. But she also has to confront Zero for good.
Oh no! Are you okay? You idiot! How could you do this?
And it's only then that by herself she's able to beat Zero and reunite the bird with its family. And I don't know, man, this was kind of cool to me. It's a similar story to Tails, but this kind of stuff made these characters stand out from other platformer characters, especially since most of the girl ones back then were just damsels in distress or just one-sided love interests. She has some gameplay issues, but her overall campaign experience remains solid for me. Aw shit. Oh, I'm not mad. Now I'm playing as Big. Quite the contrary, actually. Big is actually my favorite character in the franchise.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Now hold on, you're gonna let me explain this. Big's story is barely connected to the main plot at all. He is just a random cat that enjoys fishing with his best friend Froggy until one night Froggy eats a Chaos Emerald and gets possessed by Chaos, also eating Chaos tail and getting his tail. So his story consists of him trying to get his friend back, and how does he do that? By fishing. Hell yeah! You see, even in the early stages of Sonic Adventure's development, the developers wanted to implement fishing into the game, and so they made a whole character just for it. It was supposed to be a breather from all the action of the other gameplay styles, and that's kinda what it is. You see, despite having one more stage than Amy, Big's campaign is actually shorter, or the shortest, of all the 6 campaigns, and getting Froggy back is a pretty simple task. Usually Froggy will be at the first water area of the level, and he'll be the easiest to catch. In fact, Big has the least amount of learning when it comes to just completing his campaign. You can just throw the rod in and move it around, except that's where the first issue comes in. Moving the rod means moving it in the opposite direction you want it to go into. So you want it to go right, you gotta go left, and there's a delay in that input. Reeling it in works just fine by pressing the A button, but you need to use it both to bait out the frog or fish, and once they grab the bait, you need to press down the analog stick so that you'll be able to catch them. Not doing this can have them run away, then you need to reel them in while being mindful of how much force is being applied to the rod. If the rod gets too much force, it'll break, and that takes away a life. Damn, he didn't have a spare one on him? Froggy is much weaker than the other fish. He will fight back like them, but he isn't as aggressive. You can still move the rod left or right towards you to get them closer before they start dashing, and it becomes harder to reel in. But even then, it's better just to tap the A button instead of just holding it down, as your rod might spike out of nowhere. Like I said though, this is fine for catching Froggy because he's real simple to get, and it's the rest of Big's gameplay outside of his story, aka his trials, where a problem occurred. His levels start out fine. You start out fishing in the Twinkle Park pool, which is small enough to show you the ropes. Ice Cap allows more exploration, but again, the first Ice Cap pool is all you need to access to get Froggy. Emerald Coast is fully unique and is my favorite out of the 4 stages. It even gets its own unique music. It also has extra exploration with the cove area that you need to access underneath the water. Then you have the hot shelter, which takes the longest to get to the fishing area, but once you get there, you don't need to go any further. Despite there being this whole area that you can reach by using Big's fishing abilities, which this is the only level to do this, by the way. Like, there's this whole area above that's exclusive to Big that you don't need to go to at all. It's all optional. I mean, even for the trial for this stage, you don't need to go up here. I don't see why they did this other than for people who just wanted more places to fish. But let's get to the trials. The first one isn't bad. You have to catch a fish that's 1,000 grams. Those are easy to find and easy to catch. It's the second one where the problems occur. You now have to catch a 2,000 gram fish, which are Pacific, and even then, some aren't even that exact weight. Then when you catch them, all the problems with the controls come to fruition. It takes forever to reel these things in. You don't have enough mechanics to really help with this. Changing their direction doesn't help, and reeling in just a little could spike your meter to the max instantly. It's just a long waiting game, hoping they don't dart away at the last minute each time. And the worst part is you don't know how much fish weigh until you catch them, so you could be doing all this work for nothing. Oh, and I forgot, these fish don't appear at all if you don't get Big's upgrades. Big has the most upgrades in the game, but it's really only 3, with the third having multiple variations. The mandatory one is the life belt, which allows you to float on water so that you can fish in the water by getting close to them. This helps in some areas, but not in big areas where fish can swim away fast. He also gets the power rod and multiple rod upgrades, which is supposed to upgrade the strength of the rod. Well, the power rod does this. The others you need to collect to allow bigger fish to just appear. And even then, in a place like Trickle Park, those big fish won't spawn unless you catch other fish. That's the only level to have an issue, but it's the first level and first impressions matter. The game never tells you any of this at all, so if you were stuck on these trials, this is why. This is just bad design. What was a simple fun system turned into a nightmare to control. Now you'll only encounter this if you want to 100% the game, but Sonic Adventure is the game about exploration, so you should want to explore more of it. If they wanted to go this route, I think they should have taken more notes from Sega's fishing game, Sega Bass Fishing. I only compare these two because 1, Sega made them, 2, they came out near each other, and I can tell Big's gameplay is a dumbed down version of this game. And 3, I think Sega Bass Fishing did things much better. To compare, both Sega Bass Fishing and Big's gameplay have 4 levels both. They both have a similar meter system when it comes to reeling things in, but in Sega Bass Fishing, you are stuck on a boat while Big can go anywhere. However, Sega Bass Fishing has many lures with different properties and abilities. Some you can unlock and have separate buttons to reel in fish once you catch it. In fact, once you catch and start reeling, the game will tell you which way to reel and push the line. So even for the harder fish, it always feels fair when you're trying to catch them. You know what else Sega Bass Fishing does, at least in its arcade mode? You progress by the amount of pounds of fish you get, not by how much a fish weighs. You can stack smaller fish and then catch a big one to complete the stage. There's a timer in exchange though, but I'll take that over what we got here. Dumbing down a system that was already arcade-like was pretty dumb. This is only for the last set of trials and doesn't really affect the story, but I think his campaign would be better if they implemented some of these changes. Like maybe these rods have different properties. Maybe have specific fish to get in the last trial while the first is getting a certain weight before catching Froggy. Simple solutions like this would have made the gameplay more fulfilling, but I think I'm glossing over the big cat in the room. Most people probably don't want to fish in a Sonic game, at least not be forced to. And to that I say I kind of get it. It's all in the presentation. Spyro 3 has multiple playable characters and they all get one full level with parts of levels and other Spyro levels, but they never got a full world to themselves. Big gets a campaign, no matter how short it is, no matter how good it is, no matter how good it's controlled. I don't see a world where most people look at this style and yeah, this needed to have its own story. Even though with modern gaming, stuff like this is often pushed for some dumb meme on social media, like people ask for like fishing or petting the dog, and it'll be some quick time event and some random game that has nothing to do with those things. That's enough for some joke or some character building or I don't know what the hell, like just some post on social media. Hell, even in the latest mainline Sonic game, it has quick time fishing, mostly for items you can get by regular gameplay. People don't really want to fish. They just want to see their favorite characters doing silly things. And sadly, that's why people back then hated Big. But I liked them, I always liked them. I like the fishing, seriously. I like fishing in real life. You should try it sometimes. It's a bit frustrating and time consuming, but it's an accomplishment when you catch one. But I do like the fishing in this game outside of Trial 2. I also like the character. His big design and chill personality stands out from the rest of the cast. And honestly, he just has the coolest story of all the other cast members if you really think about it. You know, when I first played this game and I was selecting the characters, I couldn't select Big, but I wanted to select him because his color was my favorite color. I love the color purple at the time. Now my favorite colors are purple and blue, so now I select Sonic and Big. But I was born to be a Big the Cat fan in a way. And I'm gonna tell you why he's awesome. Look at it from this perspective. Big the Cat is a civilian taking a stand against Eggman and a water god just to get his friend back. At the end of Big's campaign, he fishes Froggy out of chaos. That's brave. Big's only attack in the game is his fishing rod. He doesn't spin, swipe, or punch people, he fishes. When a robot steals his frog, he goes into the egg carrier alone just to get him back. Isn't that commendable? His whole adventure was just to get his friend back. And he doesn't even have crazy powers outside of his natural strength. And we grass up people like Moomin Rider from One Punch Man and characters we know can't do anything but stand in the face of the ultimate threat despite it all to protect someone and protect something. Think about how Tien fought against Second Form Cell, right? Or what if there was a random civilian who decided to take on the Joker and Batman wasn't there to help him, but he had to do it to save his friend, right? That's peak writing, right? David versus Goliath situations, you know what I'm saying? No, that's peak fiction. That's Big the Cat. That's what Big the Cat represents in this game. So let that damn cat live out his lazy days, man, because he's earned it. Respect Big the Cat.
Including Big the Cat, there were 6 characters in total in Sonic Adventure. And aside from Big, every other character was intense in some way or another. Sonic was all about speed, and Tails was always chasing Dr. Eggman, and Amy was always running away from something or other. But amidst all of them, we thought it would be a good idea to have a character who moved at his own pace, sort of nonchalantly, to change the pace of the game a little. And that's how we thought of Big the Cat. And we figured, since Big was a cat, that, if anything, he should go fishing.
Excellent! All systems, full power! Look at me! I'm your brilliant creator, Dr. Robotnik. You're the second of my E100 model machines. E102, codename Gamma.
Gamma.
Gamma is the last playable character made because a shooting style was requested by fans, apparently. Now, Sonic Team wasn't new to this type of gameplay, as Burning Rangers kind of has this, but Gamma's style is all his own. He has the speed of a Sonic character, except with aim assist. Let's just say if he was in Call of Duty, they need to ban his account. Holding the shoot button with Gamma can lock on multiple targets at once and build up a combo. This not only builds up your score, but also restores your time. I don't know why a time limit was implemented, but hey, I guess it makes his style feel more arcade-like in that way. The more you combo, the more time adds up. This is good for his trial levels, which want you to complete his stage with a certain amount of time left. It's very simple shooting, but very addictive. What's also cool about Gamma is since he's a robot, he has different modes. When he goes fast, he enters his car-like mode. If you go over water, Gamma will hover over it. And eventually, you'll get the jet booster, which will let you hover in the air for a bit, and you'll also get an upgrade to Gamma's blaster, being the laser blaster. Of all the characters, he has the most unique animations in the game. Gamma also has the most unique story. He starts out as a villain in Eggman's new E100 series. You may also notice you haven't fought these guys with anybody in the game. There's a reason for that. After running some tests, you fight Gamma's older brother, Beta, and beat him, impressing Eggman, but also showing the first sign of emotions in these robots when Beta wants to join the rest of the E-series even though he lost and was not going to join them. Eggman then sends them all away except Beta to find Froggy, because the frog is possessed by chaos. But only Gamma brings Froggy back, leading to the rest of his brothers being sent away and disposed of. Gamma is then told to capture Amy's bird, but he ends up going into the wrong room and finds his brother Beta being rearranged into some new monstrous robot. While his voice is still robotic, Gamma shows some fear at the sight of this happening. All of this happening at once just shows how ruthless Eggman is to his creations. If at any point Gamma failed, he could have been in the same position as his brothers. It's that in Amy's speech that gets to Gamma and makes him betray Eggman, overwriting his programming and realizing his goal of freeing his brothers.
Dr. Robotnik. Enemy. Master registration deleted. E-Series. Friends. Must save.
This is where Gamma's campaign really begins. The first 2 levels of Gamma were very short tutorials, and the last 3 show his true gameplay. The extra addition on top of shooting your way through a stage is fighting one of your brothers at the end. You see, setting them free meant killing the— Whoa! That's not brotherly love at all. You see, the free part is actually freeing the animal inside of each of these robots, or the true soul inside of them. And these guys put up no fight whatsoever. You can literally sit in one direction and just keep shooting at them because your shots will override theirs. I kind of see why Eggman abandoned them. Sonic probably would have run through these guys in milliseconds. But yeah, that's why he destroys the robots' bodies, to free their real souls. The first two are just hanging out in the Mystic Ruins, while the last ones are hanging out in the sunken egg carrier. Gamma's hot shelter is his last stage, and it's completely unique to him. He has a whole train section and rooms that no one else has. Do you see why Tails gets so much shit from me? Like, the last set of characters got all these wholly unique areas, while he got the same shit as Sonic except cut out until the very, very end. Espelon turns out to be attached to a device which needs to destroy to defeat him. The more they live, the less identity they have. This all culminates in the final battle with an upgraded Beta, one of my favorite fights in the game. Beta will dodge your shots naturally, and you have to wait for him to charge at you, and he'll go up and shoot a big blast at you. The whole time, dude is leaving after images just to show how much of his upgrades have put him over Gamma. The only thing in this fight I wish is that Eggman was involved somehow. Like, Eggman never witnesses Gamma's betrayal and never reacts to it. I would have loved to see that. However, at the same time, it just shows how much he does not care for his creations. Even if they have life, once their usefulness is gone, they mean nothing. Here is Beta fully upgraded, trying to show off his superiority, but Eggman could care less about it. It means nothing to him. It's a soul trapped to serve a master who could care nothing about it. The Crazy Robo song is also pretty hype. Gamma finishes off his brother, but not without taking a fatal blow in return. But this is what Gamma wanted, to set himself and his brothers free. Two souls being the parents of the bird that Amy took care of. So in a way, Gamma still lives on. Now, I ain't cried the scene when I was younger. I didn't cry one bit. But something about it always got to me. It was cool seeing the perspective of an enemy like this. We usually just destroy these guys and free the animals without a second thought. But now we see one come to realize what he is and truly save himself. That's pretty powerful and more impactful than something like, I don't know, having some random guy we don't know or care about yell out some other random guy's name that we don't know or care about after they die, or we take them out just to feel some emotion. Shade aside, the only problem I have with Gamma is I wish his first two stages were longer. The trial of Emerald Coast is pretty tough, but they are very short tutorial levels with only 3 levels left that fully flesh out his gameplay. At least it all uses his gameplay though. Now Gamma would remain dead outside of like 2 spin-offs, so they fully committed to his death. He was set free. That's part of why his story was so impactful. Now that wouldn't stop them from wanting to bring him back, but we'll get to that when we cover those games where they tried to bring him back. Now these last 3 characters are often criticized for not being that important to the story and having some issues with their gameplay compared to the other 3 characters, as if Tails didn't have his own issues with his campaign. But I see them as I would see other characters in an RPG. When you have a party, especially a big party, not everybody in that party is going to be as important to the story, but they will all serve a purpose to the story or to the game. Look at Final Fantasy VII. There are really only about 4 characters that are really central to the main plot. The final villain is Sephiroth, but you still got to deal with Shinra. which Shinra did end up causing the birth of Sephiroth into what he is, and experimenting on Nova, and there's Hojo. There's multiple factors that have to be taken down. And while maybe not everybody has ultimate beef with Sephiroth, they do have ultimate beef with Shinra, which caused a lot of these things to happen. And so in the process of taking down Sephiroth, you have to take down Shinra. In this game, Eggman is the cause of Chaos Reawakening. And while Chaos, yes, he is going to be the final boss of the game, he is not the central threat of the overarching stories. And how I can tell you this is because Sonic fights Eggman in the end. Tails fights Eggman in the end. The only two characters that fight Chaos in the end are Knuckles and Big. And Knuckles actually fights him. Big just saves Froggy and goes on. Everyone kind of forgets about Chaos, and that's for a specific reason. The other stuff that people are dealing with, like Amy dealing with Zero or Gamma dealing with the E100 series, are related to Eggman. So everybody is still related to the central point of the plot. It's just that they're not all related to Chaos. But again, the game itself is not fully focused on Chaos. Chaos is the final enemy, but he's not the only enemy, because Eggman is also a central enemy. And as long as you're fighting one of those two, I think you're just as important to the story as the other ones. Plus, they're almost always involved because of a Chaos symbol or something like that. The only one that's really not involved with Chaos is Gamma, because Gamma just kind of serves Eggman and doesn't really run into Chaos at all or give him any Chaos symbol besides giving him Froggy. So that's a thing. But he also takes care of Eggman's other forces so they don't come after the other characters in the game, even though they probably wouldn't have been that much of a threat. And in terms of their gameplay, I do like the variety they add to it. I know people get on the fishing, but I told you I love the fishing. And Gamma's shooting gameplay is pretty fun, even if it's simple. And even if Amy is slow, I still enjoy her first two levels. They're really fun to go through, especially when they try to speed run through them with her athleticism. So I don't think these characters bring the game down at all. In fact, I think in some ways they enhance the game more, allowing us to see different perspectives with each one of them compared to the main trio that we already knew about before.
Sonic games have always been about running, and running fast. But many fans voiced the opinion that they wanted to see shooting elements in a Sonic game. The problem is that Sonic would never use a gun. It's just not in his character. So, in order to live up to those requests, we knew as a team that we needed to do something drastic. The question is, how do you add shooting elements to a Sonic game? We decided to add a whole new character, a robot who specialized in shooting. And that's how Gamma was born.
Now, I already went over the trial missions, but now I want to tie together that content with the extra mission content from the X and the Chao Garden, which will be covered in the next section. Mission mode, the extra content from the X, is really just a way to give you stuff to do in the adventure fields after the campaign. In the original version of the game, all you had to do was get some of the emblems, which could be found in some areas in the adventure field, and some of them were given by achieving high scores in some of the sub-games as well, and also achieved by doing some of the trial missions, as I've mentioned throughout the other characters' discussions. But besides that, that was it. And of course the Chao Garden, which we'll get into later. However, in the X, you have mission mode, which gives you more of a reason to stay in the adventure field besides the small amount of emblems you can find in it. I see these as like the side quests in an RPG. Each character has a certain amount of missions, with Sonic having the most and the rest having them split like how their levels were split in the main game. But a lot of characters don't have as many missions as the other characters. I also feel they serve to utilize some of your abilities more, like Tails' Weed Whacker missions. Some missions also have you finding items in levels like balloons or flags or even signs with Sonic X promotions on them, which is really cool to see that connection with the show at the time. Also, in the DX version of the game, at certain points in the story, you'd be able to see Cream the Rabbit flying around. This was a small tie-in, as when the game released, that was also the year that Sonic X released, and also the year that Sonic Advance 2 released, which were her first appearances in the series. It was just nice to have more of a reason to keep exploring and using the characters. The only problem with it is the couple of irritating missions, particularly this one mission. And no, I'm not talking about the one in Ice Cap with Sonic snowboarding. I'm talking about the other one in Ice Cap with Tails snowboarding. You see, unlike Sonic's where you have to just continue doing tricks, which you could normally do in his regular stage, when it comes to Tails, you have to get these flags at the very end of the stage, and oh my gosh, it's atrocious. If you miss one, you gotta restart. Slow down, you gotta restart, because it's the only time, the only time Sonic will probably beat you. And the sensitivity on these flags, man, are atrocious. You better be pixel perfect or you are out of there. And you have no checkpoints because this is at the very end of the stage. So if you mess this up, you got to restart the whole level, which is the entire snowboarding section. Now there are similar missions to this that I need to record, like one in Lost World where you have to get the flags or running away from the boulder. That one is real bad too. Like those are the most egregious, but there aren't many of these that put you in scenarios like this. I don't know what they were thinking when they designed those types of missions, but for the most part, the missions are alright, and they give you more reason to stay in the game. But the missions were just an extra addition to keep you playing DX. In the original version, there was also some extra content, or I should say some extra downloadable content. Yes, there was DLC on a Dreamcast. Yes, folks, Sega was ahead of the game. They were always ahead of the game. And they had holiday themed DLC, some mission DLC. Now, these aren't the same as the missions that appeared in the DX upgrade, but they definitely took inspiration from it when making the missions from DX. Now, some of the most notable DLCs, again, were the Christmas DLC and a New Year's event, which would theme the adventure fields around it, most particularly Station Square. Even for the Christmas theme, they would even play the a cappella version of Dream Dreams from Nights in the Dreams, which is also in that Christmas demo from Christmas Nights in the Dream, which is pretty cool, as another connection of nights. There was also a racetrack to promote Samba de Amigo, even though it wasn't really themed around Samba de Amigo, and the music it played wasn't even Samba de Amigo music, but it was called that, and it promoted the game somehow, since Sonic Team made that game too. And later on down the line, Amigo would cross over with Sonic in future titles. So that was technically their first crossover. Now, unfortunately, you can't download these anymore, and only mods on PC can restore them, which I couldn't get to work in time, so I provided some screenshots for you to see. Again, Sega was out here with the innovation, man. That's one thing you could never take away from them. Now, one last thing I want to mention before going into the final gameplay style is the cut version of Windy Hill. Now, I didn't mention this much with the game, but I feel like there is a hell of misconceptions when it comes to Sonic's level design, or level design in this game in particular. Now, I'm not talking about negative stuff or positive stuff I guess at the time. I just feel like there's just misconceptions on how people thought the levels were designed. Oftentimes, hear people say that Sonic Adventure's levels feel more open compared to later titles. But honestly, outside of Knuckles' gameplay and the adventure fields, they really aren't. They're more open linear. Like, there are a couple of very small open areas in the levels, but it's still on a linear path. It probably just feels like that because of the more open areas in the game, and because some of those areas are a bit more open. But there really isn't an open level, at least like what you would imagine if you were to turn something like from Sonic 3K into a 3D area. Well, there was going to be, and that stage would have been Windy Valley. You see, Windy Valley originally was supposed to look like this. Now, this is a mod that restored a lot of the textures and level layouts, so it's not 100% what the devs were going to put in the game, but this was the original Windy Valley, and man, it's definitely open. Look at all these pathways, man. Look at all these unique landmarks to explore. I emphasize and talk about the levels so much in Sonic's story because they are so important. Great movement means nothing if your level design and aesthetics are absolutely garbage, and this, my friend, this level is not. Now, why was this cut from the game? Probably because it was so damn big. This level would appear in early trailers for the game, with characters that didn't even appear in Windy Valley, like Big the Cat, appearing in the trailer. That's normal for early footage of games like this. They always did this. It was kind of a thing where they used early footage to promote the game. I don't think it was meant to be false advertising, but I wonder why they would get rid of everything and not just make it work with some cuts. I guess it was an experiment to see if they could make an expansive level like this, but maybe it just couldn't run on the Dreamcast. Now, this was Tails' first level. This would have been a hell of a first impression, especially for his gameplay, because this feels like it was made for him, but it remains as something that we never got. Still, shout out to the modding community for restoring this level. Seriously, the modding community of Sonic games have been carrying the PC versions of these games like beyond what they originally were, and it's awesome they exist. Now, back to what was in the regular versions of Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure DX, we're on to the most ambitious gameplay style that we've seen yet, because yes, there's technically a 7th gameplay style. Okay, one last extra fact. Some of the music in this game was lifted from the Genesis version of 3D Blast and remixed for this game. These include the go-kart area in Twinkle Park and the 3rd section of Windy Valley. These are remixes of Green Grove for Windy Valley and Panic Puppet for Twinkle Park. Pretty cool, huh?
As for the Chao, the people who played Knights probably already know this, but for that game, we had developed what we call a life, or an artificial life form that lives within the world of the game. We wanted to add this element into an action game. We wanted something different for our new action game. We wanted something that felt alive and would grow with the character. The concept of A-Life was so well taken in Knights that we added it to Sonic Adventure. This not only changed up the style of the gameplay, but it allowed people who weren't necessarily good at action games to be able to play a Sonic game for the first time. As people spent more and more time with the Chao portions of the game, little did they know that they were actually becoming good at the rest of the game, and were soon able to actually play through the action portions as well. We really wanted to introduce Sonic to people who weren't good at action games, and to expand the reach of the game. That's why we included the Chao in the design. We really just wanted to expand the world of Sonic, and to expand the game to people who never had the chance to play a Sonic game before.
And that last gameplay style will be the Chao Garden, which ends up being its own RPG in itself. You see, if you watched my Knights video, you remember I mentioned the A-Life system with the Knightopians. The Chao Garden was built off of that and expanded greatly, now getting its own dedicated levels for this gameplay mechanic. For each adventure field, there's a Chao Garden, and when you go in it, you'll get 2 Chao eggs. Now you can shake these things to hatch them, or wait on them, or just chunk them. Don't do that, it'll affect their personality. Yeah, this is like a full-blown pet/Chao simulator. Chao have personalities, they can be named, and have emotions towards you. If you feed them and care for them, they'll love you, sometimes even running up to you when they see you. But if you accidentally abuse them, because you may hit them on purpose or by accident, then they will hate you. You can get them back to liking you fast if you keep caring for them enough though. They also will be confused if you keep switching between characters. They get attached to whoever cares for them the most, and if you have a heart, you'll start getting attached to them too. The Chao will also begin to evolve. They even try to do things like swim in the water even though they struggle. This is where the other part of the game comes in. What was once just showing you saving animals from Dr. Eggman has now become a whole mechanic, with the animals you save in levels being used to evolve the Chao. Different animals help boost different stats: fly, run, swim, and power. Depending on which stats you focus on first will depend on what type that Chao evolves into. So if you give your Chao run animals, they'll evolve into a run type Chao and change its appearance. The run and fly type Chao are really cool because they look like Sonic and Knights respectively when they evolve. The power and swim types seem more original in their design. I couldn't really match them in anything. You can only collect 10 animals per stage, so you're going to be constantly going in and out of the garden. And the best garden to raise them in is the Station Square one, as it's the most simple and the smallest, making managing your Chao easy. It's also the one that had the most drastic difference between the Dreamcast version and the DX. Within the Dreamcast game, it's nearly empty, but in the DX game, it looks like a hotel lobby. The Mystic Ruins Garden is a large area full with jungle elements, and the Egg Carrier Garden is some random paradise island that you are teleported to. This island is huge and has plenty of water to swim in. Again, why does Eggman just have all this shit on the Egg Carrier? Was dude taking care of Chao like that too? I mean, you can find a Chao egg on the Egg Carrier, and that's another thing. Some of the adventure fields, well, all the adventure fields have Chao eggs you can find in them. Some being rare variants that you can take them to the Chao Garden and hatch them. My favorite was the gold one that I found in Station Square, and that's the one I used to show most of the gameplay off here. Now back to the evolution. The reason you really want your Chao evolved is so they can compete in the Chao race, which also has emblems that you have to earn. This is a long process, which is why the Chao Garden is supposed to be a passive thing. It's meant to be something that you can go back to as you play through the game, but even if you beat everything, this still will push you to beat levels faster and faster and get animals just to get your Chao up. In a way, it creates real endless replay value, something the old games only hope to do once you know all the routes with all the characters. Plus, it caught on to the trend at the time, and the trend I'm talking about is that digital pet/covert/ball trend, the one in my era. You know, Pokemon, Digimon, Tomodachi, Yu-Gi-Oh, Beyblade, Bakugan, and all that other stuff. It was just a trend to have some monsters you could build up and make strong and take care of. Sonic Adventure at the time felt a lot more personal with it though, because you were raising these things from birth and not just capturing or trading them. Though Pokemon could technically do the same later down the line, and instead of battling them, you have the races. Now races are luck and stat and mood dependent. Yes, all three. All of your stats matter here, and one other stat was added to the X because of the SA2 Chao system being integrated into the SA1 system. That stat was stamina. Each race highlights one of the stats races, with the last one needing them all. You start in the beginner races, and the way the stats work is that the child selected to race against you actually level with you, but slowly as you level up until you beat them. So you keep leveling your stats until it matches and surpasses them. In the starting races, stamina matters. It needs to be up, because if it's not, your child will sometimes sit down in the middle of the race for a bit. This also happens if your child is sleeping in the garden. Whatever state your child is in the garden will reflect in the race. If your child is upset or hungry or doesn't like you, even with high stats, they may not perform well in the race. I had to learn this the hard way multiple times because I tried to get my child to race while he was asleep. Now you can give your child a boost in these races too, but only when the game wants you to, and it will select child that it feels bad for randomly for a boost. And if you press A or you keep spamming A, you'll boost them, hurting your own child in the process. Bruh, who would want to do that? Now it's a lot of trials and tribulation going through the child races, but as you go through them, you'll start to understand your child more. The child evolves and becomes an adult at a certain point. They can even mate with other child, like out of nowhere, mine just wanted to mate. The sad part about evolved child though, is that if you don't increase their stats as an adult, they will still only crawl if they're a baby instead of walking. I had this happen to my other child and he became a crybaby, or I think he already had that crybaby personality. I thought he was sad because of neglect or something like that, but having a crybaby personality is also a thing apparently. But he always gets happy to see me if I pet him. Now, child can also die. I think that happened to me. But if they're happy, they'll reincarnate, which death and reincarnation are an inevitable thing, so you want to make sure that your child is happy so it can reincarnate. They can also just run away from your garden if you make them really upset, but to get this in depth, you have to treat the child really, really poorly. But me, I ain't doing that. I mean, look at my child. He even draws cute pictures of Sonic, man. How can you hate these guys? I won't lie, at a certain point, it does get a bit irritating having to go back to certain levels for specific stats. Emerald Coast is good for the swim animals, Speed Highway is good for the speed/fly animals, and Red Mountain is good for the power animals. The thing is, you can only get these animals in the adventure fields, so you have to go in and out of the garden, through an adventure field, and then through a level, and then go back. It gets tiring with Red Mountain, but every time I get tired, I would see my child evolve and start flying out of nowhere, or swimming backwards, or running really fast. You just create a bond with these things like no other. I don't even feel this way about the Pokemon that I used to have. I think it's because of how you have to raise them up like babies or children and adults. It's like a child and parent relationship, whereas something like Pokemon is more like a pet.
I do love your mother, but she's more like a pet to me.
I didn't mean it that harshly. But with all this loving, child, I need you to win. The emblems are in the jewel races, which are the same races but harder. I got my child to level 60 in all stats outside of stamina to finally win. Now after beginner, stamina doesn't matter that much. So if you get the rest of the stats up like my child, he'll start mollywopping the competition. Now you want to beat all the races first before beating the final one, because when you beat the final one, regardless if you beat the others, a rival will appear. This lazy ass black child named Charon. He'll sit at the start like for half of the race and then start sprinting out of nowhere to catch up. Unless you have really high stats, he will catch up and beat you. Unfortunately for him, I was over leveled and got to the third set of difficulty before he appeared, so now he can't even beat the other child in the race. But neither can I. But my child is at least beating his bum ass. But doing it the right way gave me the last set of emblems before they all appeared. Yet I still kept coming in to take care of my child and raise new ones. Like, it's my children here, man. The Chao Garden is so addicting, yet without the other part, you know, the rest of the game, I don't think it would be as appealing. Look at Pokemon and look at how much you could do with them. You can battle with them, level them up, get them new moves, evolve them, even breed them. That whole game and its systems are based around the Pokemon. Most of the Chao Garden is waiting, watching, and petting. It's a real break from the main action of the game, or it just gives you a reason to come back. This is especially apparent in the Dreamcast version, where you could only shake them to pet them. Yeah, there wasn't a proper pet function in the game in the original Dreamcast version. No one tells you about this when they compare both versions. There wasn't much interactivity because most of SA2's improvements were not added. A lot of the interactivity was on the VMU, which had some features that would be added to the Tiny Chao Garden in Sonic Advance, where you could play these little mini games with the Chao. Now with the Tiny Chao Garden that was in Sonic Advance, you connected to the GameCube, allowing you to transfer Chao between the GameCube and the Game Boy Advance. And speaking of transferring Chao and Chao eggs, there are also some rare variants of Chao exclusive to each version of the game. Some that you would need to buy, and I mean there are a lot of these things. Some were even only on the online Dreamcast store that you can't even use anymore. Some were tied to different online events. This was the original black market that was on the Dreamcast. Now in DX, they just put the black market that was in Sonic Adventure 2, so you're able to buy different items and eggs for your Chao. Even though you can't access the online stuff anymore, it's still amazing that the Dreamcast had this option. So even though the Chao Garden Dreamcast is a lot more primitive than the one you see in DX or on the PC version, it was still a great starting step for the system that could get you attached to these little creatures. It's even easier to complete the Chao races because without the stamina stat, you can get your other stats up regularly. However, you won't get any 100% completion award because that was only on the DX version of the game. So after doing everything, you slowly unlock all of the Game Gear games and unlock Metal Sonic. Now he's just pretty much a skin for Sonic and doesn't retain any of his abilities that was given to him in Sonic Adventure 2 in multiplayer mode, but it's cool that he comes with his own traits. Personally, I think Super Sonic in levels would have been a better reward, but hey, anything would be better than nothing, like it was in the Dreamcast version. The Game Gear games, however, are the real highlight to me. I know everyone starts to shit on them today because they're Game Gear games, but there are plenty of great titles here, and at the time, this was the only game to have them all in one collection. The Mega Collection Plus, which was not on the GameCube, only had half, and the other half were on the Gems Collection. A couple of these were also Japan exclusives. Yeah, Sonic Drift 1 and Tail Sky Patrol were only released in Japan. I mean, there are some of the lesser titles on here, but that's still nice that they are here in the first place. Sonic Chaos was what I played like crazy back then. I remember late Friday nights where I could finally play the game after school trying to beat this game. I would always get stuck on Mecha Green Hill Zone, and I just remember being in this dark room playing Gigapolis with that music, man. That was the one I played the most. Now this was mostly because it was hard to 100% the game back then, and my memory card corrupted twice, and this is one of the first games you unlock, so that's why I played it a lot. But to be given access to Sonic's history was like discovering some hidden library back then. Many franchises don't even do this for all their titles. I feel like we take this for granted today, and that's why GameCube DX will always be my favorite version of the game. Now, the PC version does restore the Game Gear games, which is not in the 360 HD version, but if we're talking about which game has it before fans came in with mods to fix the game, then the GameCube version is the one that has all the features. But now that we went over all this, let's finally wrap it up with the last story, Super Sonic.
As all Sonic fans know, the primary villain in every previous Sonic game had always been the notorious Dr. Eggman. But we knew that in order to make a bigger game, something with much more impact, I wanted to take advantage of the technological jump that we made going from Genesis to Dreamcast in a Sonic game. I wanted to create an enemy that hadn't been possible until now. I wanted something bigger, something transparent and liquid because the technology now allowed for it. I wanted something that would wow the users. That's when we came up with the idea for Chaos. He was larger than Sonic, and he looked much more powerful than any enemy any Sonic game has ever seen. And that's why we wanted to have him from the very beginning, and we included him in the opening movie sequence. We wanted to make a statement. We wanted to show users from the very beginning of Sonic Adventure that this game was bigger and better. When we first designed Chaos, we presented the drawing to Naka-san, and he liked the idea so much, he approved it on the spot.
I hate that Sonic. He always seems to get in my way. I just can't foil my master plan. Chaos!
The Master Emerald is where it belongs. But Angel Island is still falling. That doesn't make any sense. Maybe those Chaos Emeralds that I brought back with me have something to do with what's happening. I'll take them to Sonic for his advice. Eggman! Is what?
Guess Eggman learned his lesson. Yep. And maybe I'll take another vacation somewhere.
Sonic!
Hey there, Tails! Did you find the tornado too?
Never mind that. Get up and follow me. Angel Island is falling again.
Hey, no way! Who blew it this time?
Oh, I don't know, but we better hurry!
What we all been waiting for. Man, I remember beating all these stories and being so confused when I saw this. This is my first exposure to Supersonic. It didn't even have a character in front, just a question mark. I was also confused because it seemed like everyone's stories had wrapped up. But just like the characters, I also forgot about Chaos. Chaos, for the most part, even as a kid, was not that much of a threat. I mean, he looked really cool, he had a cool design, and he was made out of the element that Sonic was weak to, which is water. But when it comes to fights, outside of maybe Chaos 6, dude was kind of a jobber. But to give him credit, this is not even his final form. While everyone was ignoring Chaos, he snuck back onto Angel Island and got the Chaos Emerald from Knuckles and Eggman. Now he's gone rogue, tracking down the last emerald and turning into his true, perfect form. The monster that you see in the opening. The monster that you were warned about from the past. Perfect Chaos. This is why he was feared and why he was called the God of Destruction, as his mere presence floods the earth. The strongest being Sonic has faced up to this point, even demolishing Eggman's weapons without a thought. This wasn't another giant robot or some emerald powered robot or no robot, none of that. This was a full-on kaiju god. But what could cause this madness? Well, to answer that, we have to look into the past. I wanted to wait all the way until here to discuss those past sequences that you see in the game. This orb of light that's been guiding you is Tikal. She is the ancient member of the Echidna tribe. Long ago, the Knuckles clan, who were once a peaceful tribe, began warring with other tribes around them, thanks to the influences of their leader and Tikal's father, Pachamaniac, who wanted the power to defeat his enemies. Near the Echidna's home was a shrine that held the Master Emerald and the Chaos Emeralds. It was a sacred shrine where the Chao were protected by the first guardian of the emeralds, Chaos, who himself was a mutated Chao. Tikal tried her best to protect the shrine from her father and his dark ambitions, trying to uphold her peaceful teachings from her late grandmother. But soon he invaded and wiped out all of the Chao there to get the power of the emeralds. Angered by the massacre of the Chaos, Chaos evolved into his perfect form and wiped out all of the Knuckles clan army that were present. Tikal Call, in a desperate move, seals herself and Chaos in the Master Emerald, but Chaos's rage was never quenched. This leads us into the modern day. What I just summarized for you was all the sequences you experienced throughout playing everyone's stories. Now, these do not all play in the correct order or show the full events to every character. Some may even say that some of the characters like Amy, Gamma, and Big have no reason to be seeing this, but the goal of this was to reach out for help and to prevent Chaos from evolving. Also, most of these relate to something that is happening in that character's story. For instance, the call talks about protecting the Chao in Amy's playthrough, much like how she's protecting the bird at the time in her playthrough. It's all meant to be relatable. Unfortunately, and I cannot stress this enough, nobody, and I mean nobody, really took these things seriously outside of thinking it was some dream until this story. Well, except Knuckles, who kinda took it a bit seriously, but even then, he didn't finish the job. Nor does he care enough about his clan's history to be worried about that stuff, which is also a part of the game's theming in a way. Now, in the Supersonic story, Sonic is sent to the past yet again, where he finally realizes what Chaos is, but by that point, it's too late. So two of the most important characters who need this information the most did not prioritize it and let Chaos get to this form. I guess what I'm trying to say is that even if you say someone shouldn't have been shown this, the two motherfuckers that were shown this didn't do jack, rabbit, and shit to stop it. And that's kind of the point. If you never saw the opening cutscene, Chaos would be just a new weapon. But this is a character who has been weaker throughout most of the game and has come back in a major way. He is the main event now. Now you can say Tikal couldn't explain the tutorials, but couldn't spell this out to the character directly. And to that I say, you're right, but I'm pretty sure that tutorial explanation thing is only a game thing. In the story, she only guides the characters to the past, and when they see her light, they act like they've never seen it before. So it's only a gameplay thing. I know some people criticize the backstory being spread out like this, but honestly I always liked it because it didn't just try to lure W at the very end. It was a mystery that you had to piece together, and it gave it more weight when it appeared that way. Plus, you got to explore the past area with certain characters, and even talk to the echidnas. Even the adventure elements came into play in these sections. The echidnas of the past would sometimes tell you more of the backstory of their tribe, like that grandmother thing. That's one thing they told you, they talked to you about, or how they were peaceful before Hatchamaniac got ambitious. That's a thing you learn by talking to them. It's not really shown in a cutscene. These guys will even give their opinions on it, and some will just scream out war chants or war advice. A lot of them like doing that. Now, you'll only be able to find some of this by exploring the past, and sometimes the game will not put you in spots where you think you could explore, but you can. Like with Big here, if you walk back, you can go into the temple area and talk to the echidnas. This is the type of stuff that RPGs do, and if you watch my RPG videos, you know how much I can't stand that type of dialogue being hidden by random NPCs, but it is a staple of the genre, and it was something brought over here that I usually see no one talk about. Also, although his model has open eyes, for some reason, no matter the version, Hatchamaniac eyes are always closed. I don't know why this happens, and if this area looks familiar, it's probably because in the future this will become Angel Island. Though it's not stated or shown in the game, after the events of Chaos, the Knuckles clan, at least what was left of it, decided to protect the Master Emerald instead of using it, and sealed it away, using its power to send the island to the sky, creating the Angel Island we know today, and the long line of guardians until Knuckles would appear, who would be the last one. Now back to the present. All hope seems lost. Chaos has used the Emerald's power and seems unstoppable. Tikal finally manifests fully into the world, planning to try and seal Chaos away again. But as Sonic said, if he holds the same hatred as before, it'll all end the same way. It's then shown that because of Chaos's hatred, he only used the negative energy of the Chaos Emerald and not the positive energy, meaning only one thing.
Go Sonic! Yeah, Sonic!
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 Negative forces aren't the only way to empower the Chaos Emerald. Our positive feelings toward each other can make them work. Our hearts together form awesome power.
Supersonic, man. I marked out seeing this form for the first time. Watching DBZ and playing this game at the same time was a time to be alive, man. Supersonic is only available for its boss fight and not in the stages, but man, what an impression that it makes. This was the first time it felt like an enemy needed that form to be taken down. It wasn't some strong robot, this was an entirely new being, a water god, a kaiju if you will. Though Supersonic is invincible, you can still die and lose all your rings, which can be done if Perfect Chaos stalls you enough with his attacks. He will shoot laser beams, send hurricanes and tornadoes, and shoot out a bunch of blasts to stop you from reaching him and hitting his brain. Each round of this getting more intense with his attacks. Any of our characters fighting Perfect Chaos without the emeralds would have been wiped from existence. But Supersonic can just tank that shit. Shows how strong both of these characters are. And then the music, man. Now I haven't mentioned the music much at all, and I don't really mention it much in videos now because I don't have much insightful commentary besides that's rad or some shit. But the whole soundtrack is just awesome. Not just the level themes, but the main themes of the game and the characters as well. Let's go over some of those themes. Sonic's theme, It Doesn't Matter, is about continuing on no matter what happens, before or after, which matches his attitude with its rock and roll. Tails' theme, Believe in Myself, is about him believing in himself to overcome his fears and obstacles, just like the story in the game. Knuckles' theme, Unknown for Me, which is a rap theme because he was always a brother, is about his duties and trials as a guardian, also about him boasting himself. Amy's theme, My Sweet Passion, is man, I ain't gonna lie to you, I always hated this one. It always sounded weird to me, but I guess it's a girl boss or power or whatever the ladies say nowadays, empowering her when she protected the bird and stuff like that from her story. This theme was weird. Now Big's theme, Lazy Days, as well, about his lazy days with his best friend. And then there's Gamma's theme, which while having no lyrics ends up being one of the most emotional themes in the game, being this mechanical, melancholy, somber theme at first that gets more hopeful and less mechanical by the end. I guess this is symbolizing his robotic origins to him discovering his soul at the end of the game, or at the end of his story. All of these themes don't just match the characters in terms of their genre of music, but they match in what they represent. And this all comes together with the main theme, Open Your Heart. Open Your Heart, which is the first of many rock themes for Sonic games, and the introduction of Crush 40 to the franchise with Jun Sonoy and John Gorley combining their musical talents to elevate the Sonic gaming experience. Not only does this song kick ass, but like the rest of the things in the game, it ties into the events. Like, listen to these lyrics, man. It's like Sonic is trying to break through the chaos, removing that hatred and anger throughout the lyrics of the song. It just sucks that halfway through the fight it goes away. For Perfect Chaos, real theme emerges, this more dangerous theme. But it's not like Chaos changes forms or anything like that. I mean, his attack is more frantic, but the fight itself doesn't really change. I wish Open Your Heart stayed the full time. Also, Jun Sonoy did most of the soundtrack for this game, so shout out to him, one of my favorite composers from the series. But even without my theme playing, I can still beat you, Chaos.
Hey, I'll play with you some other time.
Yeah, you better open your heart to that. Chaos is defeated and purified, and with his anger gone, he can finally see what he protected this entire time.
Chaos has changed again. This time for the better.
Yeah! Supersonic must have neutralized it, so it's nice again.
These are the Chao you were protecting. They stayed alive for generations and now live peacefully with humans. fighting's over, harmony's restored, and life goes on. Thank you so much.
All's well that ends well, right? Sonic?
And even with the city still flooded and all the lives damaged and everything going around, somehow, some way, Sonic and Eggman's antics go back to normal. It'll all be fixed in the next game.
Sonic Adventure was released in 1999 in America on the Dreamcast. Sonic Adventure 2 Battle was released last year on the GameCube, which marked the first time a Sonic game had been on a non-Sega home platform. There are many people who played a Sonic game for the first time when they played Sonic Adventure 2 Battle on GameCube. But those same people never played the original Sonic Adventure and were curious about the first game in the series. Well, it's now 2003, and it's been a while since the original was released, so we decided that we should release a director's cut. We wanted to show people the creativity of Sega by showcasing a classic that we put a lot of effort into making, and that has many great hours of gameplay. We felt that the original Sonic Adventure was the perfect candidate to show the size and quality of every Sonic game. So we wanted to recreate the original Sonic Adventure on GameCube and introduce it to a whole new generation of gamers, with all of the improvements that we were unable to add to the original. And that's really why we decided to release Sonic Adventure DX Director's Cut. There were really two significant reasons, in addition to the one I just mentioned, as to why we decided to make Sonic Adventure DX. Not only did we want to bring the original Sonic Adventure to a new fanbase, we wanted to appeal to the fans who loved the original on the Dreamcast. And in order to accomplish both of these goals, killing two birds with one stone in a sense, we decided to add a whole slew of new features to Sonic Adventure DX. Simply put, we decided to go back and upgrade all of the character models in the game. Not only that, we upgraded the quality of the environments as well. We really wanted this game to graphically shine. We felt that with these new graphical improvements, the game would be closer to what we had originally envisioned. Also, to make things easier for the player, we decided to add a 2D map system. Basically, when the player presses the pause button, a two-dimensional map of the level pops up on screen and lets the player know where they need to go. We also decided to go back and redo the Chao portions of the game. We really wanted the Chao to feel more alive and more organic than in the original. Also, for the fans of the original on the Dreamcast, we decided to add what we call mission mode to change the pace of the game. It really does change the way that the game is played. The user finds the missions and has to solve each mission, almost like a treasure hunt. We really wanted this new feature to appeal to the fans of the original on the Dreamcast. And that's why we decided to add 60 missions for players to enjoy. Perhaps some people aren't aware of this, but there actually was an entire line of Sonic games available on Sega's old Game Gear system. And until now, they were only available on the Game Gear, which is why we really wanted to include these on Sonic Adventure DX. We felt that there were many fans of the series who never got a chance to play these games. So, as you play through Sonic Adventure DX, You can unlock these games one by one. The more you play, the more there is to play. We took the original Sonic Adventure, which was huge in its own right, and added the mission mode in all of the Game Gear games. And we believe that with Sonic Adventure DX, we have created a game that has more volume and more fun packed in than almost any other game on the market. We really feel that this game appeals to both new fans of the series and fans of the original. Not only do you get the original Sonic Adventure, you get all new modes and an entire series of games that you can unlock. We truly hope that people who play Sonic Adventure DX will enjoy the game and will enjoy playing through all these new features that we've added.
With Sonic Adventure released on Dreamcast, it was just what Sega needed to push their console. And even though the Dreamcast did not last that long, its legacy would stay strong for generations and be remembered fondly. But if we're talking about this game, truthfully, I feel like it's just glossed over sometimes for what it did. And I think most of that is because of the X. And that's the version that I grew up with, but it's also the version that got the most exposure. As I stated in the port section of the game, by the time it came out, it wasn't as impressive as it was in 1999. I mean, a platformer with 6 characters, hub worlds, and a whole sub-game, multiple sub-games, and the A-Life system with the child, the amount of content in this game for the time was insane, especially when you consider that this was the first game of the 6th generation, a generation that would really be defined by its content in all genres of video games, and especially if you compare it to the previous Sonic titles. And I know some may say it's too much, or it's too bloated, or it's too unfocused, but I never saw it that way. First off, there are way too many consistencies for that to be the case, like the stages. They knew what they were doing with the characters when they sectioned off each of their levels, and even if they don't always hit every mark, they definitely had a plan for each character. Now you gotta understand that around this time, 3D platformers would introduce mini-games or vehicle levels that spice up the standard platforming, like in Crash 3. The only difference between having multiple levels of that and what's in Sonic Adventure is that Sonic separated it into its own story, instead of it just being levels. But you still played as Sonic for most of the gameplay time. His story takes the longest time. The last 3 characters' total story time combined is about the same length as Sonic's story. Plus, there really aren't 6 different styles if you really think about it. I mean, Sonic, Tails, and Amy represent the action goal-based platforming. They just play a little bit differently. Knuckles and the adventure fields are like the exploration gameplay. Big has the fishing, Gamma is the shooting gameplay, and then you have the Chao gameplay that ties everything together. Most of those outside of Big's gameplay involve some type of platforming that tries its best to utilize the specific abilities of the characters. I just can't call it unfocused because many of these additions were the result of the game implementing the RPG/adventure elements. That type of stuff may seem like filler to most people, but it's all just a part of the game itself. The hubs, talking to people, the exploration, even the characters. I just feel like if you look at it purely from the action stages, you'd think this stuff was unnecessary. But when you look at it as the package all together, how the systems connect with the characters and their stories, to the levels, to all of it ultimately ending in the Chao Garden, it all just clicks. They wanted to give the players more than just the same level-to-level gameplay of the previous titles. And even if you may not like a style, at least the game commits to it. You know, if you make it good, I would say most people would enjoy it. The only unfocused area to me is level length or design for certain levels for certain characters. Tails being the big stickler here. And I'm fine with Gamma and Amy having less levels, but make sure they all feel complete. Like, maybe not have your first level be extremely short romps when you only got 5 levels all together. But even then, even with those faults, everyone has those adventure elements as a foundation to make up for them. No, I don't think Sonic Adventure was unfocused, but I do think it's not streamlined. If you played the older game, even the Game Gear ones, you just went level to level playing as the same character. There was not a hub or a cutscene or no puzzle you had to do. You just went level to level like most games back in the day did, or most side-scrollers back in the day did. If you went from the old Sonic titles to this, it would be a whiplash. But everything changed when it came to 3D. As I said earlier, Sega was an innovator, not a stagnator. I'm not going to ramble off on game history again, but they were always evolving, pushing the medium forward with their titles. I mean, even when the original Sonic the Hedgehog dropped, though it was a platformer like Mario, it changed the game so much that it made its own subgenre of rip-offs in the early 90s. I mean, in the style of its fast-paced gameplay. So it just was not gonna be enough to try and do the same thing he did before and survive. Many gaming series failed back then, and Sonic needed to evolve. I don't think ambition made this game great, but innovation did, for its content, its gameplay, and its structure. Again, Sonic Adventure was one of the first games of the 6th generation of system, a generation with games that had content for months if not years in one singular game. I don't mean replaying the same level to get better either, I mean brand new content. If you've seen me cover the Tony Hawk games, you would see what I'm talking about. Most of the ones I cover are from the 6th generation, and they had so much content, and those were just the sports games. So what do you think other genres had to do? Like, look at the Chao, for instance. That's endless evolving content, and you could probably say that type of stuff started with Pokemon, with you constantly capturing and trading new Pokemon, and that was on the freaking Game Boy. And much like Mario 64, the content you already played through could be explored at its own pace and not just rebeaten like an arcade game. That's how I spent hours discovering parts of levels. Even if it was linear, it gave off a sense of greater exploration. That's probably why people thought the game felt more open than it actually was. 3D meant an expansion of what games could be, and Sonic Adventure, even in its faults, embodied that. That adventure element is that expansion. I talk about this in my Mario 64 video, but in the end of that video, I mentioned despite all the issues, the strengths of that game just override it. Like, just having those levels to explore overwrites a dumb star mission, or whatever was on the top floor of the castle that made you mad at a certain point. That's taking it all in as an experience, and I feel the same way here. The adventure feels, the levels, characters and their personalities, the stories, the themes, the story itself, and yes, even the fishing I enjoy. I enjoy the fishing. Call me crazy, but I love it. Sonic Team didn't want to just deliver the same game with a new name. 3D meant a change in Sonic and their games like never before, and those designs and stories stuck with players. For me, just having all these gameplay modes with a story like this was so cool. Sonic was just so cool back then. It felt like you were playing an action cartoon. Platformers back then didn't try to have a story like this. Okay, I'm sorry because I forgot about Mega Man. The Mega Man titles definitely did, and they did it first, which I will be covering all of them, so stay tuned for that. But Sonic just had a world you could explore not only in the games, but in the story too. Look, I love Spyro, I love Crash, but at least in those original trilogies, the only exploration you had was through the game because the stories were not really built to be explored like that until they introduced something else in the next game. There's nothing wrong with that, but I like it when my platformers had to do more with the characters than just be the standard platformer, well, outside of a few like Spyro. And I mean, even if they didn't intend to, you had Chaos, who was built off of the Echidna Trials and hieroglyphics from Sonic 3. It makes you wonder what more Sonic's world could have to offer. Before Sonic Adventure, you only had the comics, which in Archie's case started out as comedic and based around the Saturday AM show, but they eventually took on more darker storylines like the Metallic Madness arc in the in-game arc. The Fleetway comic was also putting Sonic into some scenarios like that with the Metallics arc or the time Eggman rewrote the world. Yeah, that was something that happened. Sonic felt like a comic book superhero, much like Superman and Batman or Spider-Man. These were characters who could have range in what they fight and the tone of their stories. It just felt like the natural path for Sonic to go down, since every other person that would touch the series would go down that serious route eventually. These are what characters need to last a long time and last for generations, even with reintroductions. I'm not talking about serious stories, I mean the range. Sonic Adventure introduced the series for what it would be going forward, the characters and the story. In a way, it set the brand straight, which is kind of a mess at the time, as I explained before, because of a lot of localizations and different interpretations going on. You didn't really know exactly what was the right Sonic story, and there wasn't really a lot of online pages that put everything together. And of course, this caused a lot of debate and discussion in the fandom, but that's for another day. I mean, it got so bad that when both Fleetway and Archie had to finally adapt the Sonic Adventure storyline, which was a pain for them to do because apparently they had to do it before the game got officially translated, they had to pretty much rewrite their own lore just to fit it in with what they established in Sonic Adventure, because nobody told them this stuff until, well, Sonic Adventure came out. Yeah, that could be its whole video. And you even had things in the games, like even the emeralds were in the question. One game, Sonic the Fighters, which I love, had 8 of them when there's supposed to be 7. And like I said, when they go in and start changing these things, it's gonna cause some division. But if you commit to what you're trying to do, even if it's faults, its strengths will shine and stick with most audiences. Look, I was originally gonna go into some of the criticisms of the game from, 2010s YouTubers like everyone always does, but personally, I don't really care what they had to say. I didn't really care back then, even though they were loud, and I still don't care now. I don't think most people should really care. There's one game that's inevitable from getting that, but we'll discuss it when we discuss it. I just think it's much like Mario 64. You can have people that criticize the game, and they can say what they want about it, but no matter what they say, you're never going to take away from what it did and what it is and what it means to a lot of people. But there is one thing I do want to mention. I often see from both detractors and people who love this game, they end up calling it a mess. And personally, I don't see it as a mess, but looking into when people say that, I kind of get what they mean. When you lay out this stuff to, I guess, modern gamers or game designers, it may look like a mess of mechanics, but to me, Sonic is able to take that mess of mechanics and smush it into something that just works. Like it just works, like Todd Howard. And that's always been what made Sonic work for me, or the best of Sonic. Whenever it experimented like that, mushed those mechanics in together and made something work, and the next game was able to smush it even more and make it more excellent. You know what I'm saying? So as a starting step, especially in its era where it's competing against like Crash 3 and Spyro 2 and Banjo-Kazooie and Tooie, hey man, this was ahead of the game. I don't care what anybody says. Honestly, it kind of reminds me of Dragon Quest, like Dragon Quest 4, Chapters of the Chosen, which was a game that started you out playing different chapters as different characters that will eventually make it the full party of the final part of the game, or the final chapter of the game. And funnily enough, it also had a character that played a non-traditional role in the game, which is Torneko, except instead of being a fisherman, he was a merchant, and you played as a merchant and sold items to people for most of his story until you stopped and then went on to your own journey, and then you joined the party, and eventually you would start playing the RPG mechanics again. It kind of feels like that. I've never seen someone make the comparison, but thinking about it, it reminds me of that game. Obviously there's more nuances to it, but it worked there, and I do think it worked here. Even with the slip-ups, even if some of the mechanics and gameplay elements didn't come back, I think the overall package just works, and it's what I still love about the game. I couldn't have the game without any of these elements, even Biggs. And you can say that is nostalgia, because yeah, it is nostalgia. Just like when it's someone else's favorite game, it's nostalgia too. But that's just a factor in it when we're talking about older games. But it's those steps that these older games had that made some more modern games, or even games that came out a little bit later, even better when they tried to implement all of these genres and mechanics into their gameplay and made something new. That's what Sonic Adventure really means to me, why it's one of my favorite games of all time. It's that experimental design that I love, and even encourage me as a game developer, just start putting things together until something just works out of it. And maybe it may not be the very best or even the very height of game design, but damn it, those elements were just so fun to play. And that's why I'll keep playing it and keep pushing it on the future generations, no matter what happens. That to me is the strength of Sonic Team. They've always had these weird games that had these strange mechanics like Knights and Samba de Amigo that somehow live in the hearts of its fans. Even if not a lot of them are there, they always manage to leave an impression to the ones that do experience them. And most of the time, it's enjoyable. And to me, it all started here with Sonic Adventure, or the start of the second generation of Sonic. Now from here on out, the franchise takes some of the best elements from this game when it comes to 3D titles and try to mix and match them between the future 3D games. But those are another video for another day. With that being said, guys, this is the JayBlast Network signing out. Thanks for watching, and we're rocking hard in 2025, so stay tuned for more content. And as always, you better believe, baby, yeah, oh yeah, this is happening for real, baby. Let's go. Oh, you're still here? Well, let me give you one more trivia fact about Sonic Adventure. I noticed that I didn't really play a cutscene for Biggs. Let me tell you something about Biggs' voice actor in this game, John St. John. Now, some people think that he didn't like the role of Big, but that's not true. He just didn't like the voice they made him use because they made him use the first take he did, which I love the voice, but I understand that he could have done a better impression of what he was trying to do. With that being said, that's the fun fact. Also, he's the voice of Duke Nukem in the Postal Dude. So if you like these games, you definitely should play Sonic Adventure. Now I'm going to play the cutscene. What, you think I would forget to play Biggs' cutscene or who Biggs' voice actor was, how iconic that is? No, I definitely didn't forget it at all. I just forgot to add it to Biggs' section and I had to do it here. Goodbye.
Froggy? Uh-oh. No! Hold on there! Come back, please! Give me my friend back! I'm begging you, please!